Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
An inability to say no and a lack of determination had always been Michael Matthews' weaknesses, and it was strange because his parents achieved a lot in life just because they did not suffer from any of these things. Or perhaps the whole point was just that nature had rested on the son. Michael's parents were successful and wealthy people. They had a family business, a country hotel. Regardless of the season, there were always plenty of people wanting to stay at the hotel. That's why the Matthews business was booming. The business took up almost all of Ethan and Adriana's free time, and as it often happens in such cases, the boy almost never saw his parents. That didn't mean the boy was on his own. Not at all. Even before school, Michael's life was scheduled not by days, but by hours. English courses, public speaking, computer literacy, swimming pool, fencing, golf. This is not a complete list of courses and sections where the ever-busy parents determined their only heir. Michael faithfully went to one course. But more often than not, it happened that the boy Anna needed and gave. What's the matter? Adriana was invariably interested. Yes, but not interested. From the edges of the martyr grimace answered the son. I see, nonchalantly nodded the parent. After that, he would surf the internet for some new courses, and after a while, everything was repeated again. One day, Michael rebelled. You asked me what I wanted for once, but I'm not interested in your public speaking and yoga. Adriana gasped. But you're the son of some of the town's most respected people. Dad and I want you to be a well-rounded man. You know, well-rounded. Did you go to any of this stuff yourself before we became successful? Michael grinned crookedly. I don't have time to socialize with my friends, and they look at me like I'm an idiot. No, look at him. His mother shook her hands. No time to hang out with friends, you say. That's good. There won't be time for nonsense. Ethan, but say something. What can I say? My husband sighed. Our son has grown up to be an ungrateful man. We pay a lot of money for our son to become an interesting and cultured man, and he still turns his face away. He's not interested, you see. Have you ever said what you want? Anyway, the conversation went nowhere. Michael had an ally in Adriana's maternal grandmother. Cindy thought that such a number of sections and other, as she said, rubbish was unthinkable for a teenager. You're just taking away a boy's childhood. More than once said Cindy, but her words, apparently, were for her daughter and son-in-law an empty sound. And then seventh grader Michael went to extreme measures. One day he didn't come to school. That day the class teacher did not pay attention to his absence. But when Michael didn't show up the next day, Christina called Adriana and asked what was wrong. What do you mean he hasn't been here for 2 days? She was stunned. Where is he then? But it is you who should know where your son is, Christina replied with a faint chuckle. Michael has not attended school for the 2nd day. That's what I'm asking you. What's wrong? You're asking me what's wrong, Adriana exclaimed angrily. You're a classroom teacher and you get paid for it. But you know, Adriana resented the class teacher. With all due respect, you're wrong now. I get paid for classroom management and teaching discipline. But what happens outside the school, is on the shoulders of the parents. Michael left home and went anywhere but school. But how, pray tell? I should know where your son went. Adriana, for all her authoritarian ways, could admit when she was wrong. I'm sorry, Christina, she said. You're absolutely right. It's just not every day that you find out that your son is absent from school for a 2nd day. Yes, I understand. The class teacher softened. Thank you. Of course I'll take action. And Adriana, none of my business, of course. But meanwhile, Michael walked around the city, reveling in his freedom. Of course, he knew that when his parents found out, they'd make a big fuss. So what? Michael sincerely believed that the gain was worth it, and let them shout not as a gimmick. The main thing is that the ancestors finally understood. He, Michael Matthews, would only do what he was interested in. In the evening, When his parents came home from work, he watched TV. I wonder if Marisha had already reported Michael to them. She probably did. "Hi," Adriana said in a friendly voice. "Hi," a little warily replied the son, puzzled. Don't they know anything yet? However, "Michael, I got a call from Christina today, but now it's going to start doom." He thought and sighed heavily. But strangely enough, neither mother nor father were in any mood for scandal. Quite the opposite. "Michael, do you know what your trouble is?" Adriana asked. "You don't know how to speak." "No, learn, or you'll have a hard time. We wanted what was best for you, but you don't talk. So I thought you were fine with it." "Yeah, well, that's fine. We're our own people, but you're gonna have a lot of people in your life. And if you let everyone ride on you, you won't last long. Learn to stand your ground." Michael nodded. He wondered why his mother had brought it up. And his father, instead of giving him a good beating, had chosen to remain silent. He had some thoughts, though. Christina had brainwashed the mother, too. She loved it. Michael mentally thanked the class teacher and took note of his mother's words. But unfortunately, to say no, never learned. And it was this shortcoming that influenced his fate in a bad way. As for the lack of purposefulness, then here the parents were partly to blame. Michael had no idea what he wanted from life, and all because his parents planned his son's life for many years ahead. Parents programmed it. Michael does what he's told. After that incident, Michael returned to school safely. He studied without much enthusiasm. Thank God, at least they're off the hook with clubs, courses, sections. Study. After school, you'll enter the hotel business department, and it would be good to enroll in courses on the basics of entrepreneurship. You're going to continue the family business. My mom and I will give you some pointers, of course. But life doesn't stand still. Michael mentally scolded himself for his inability to say no, but in the end, he decided that his father was talking business, because he really will inherit the family business, which means he has to learn how to run it. And do I want to do business? The teenager thought about it and decided that rather no than yes. More precisely so, with his character would be worth trying himself in something else. But here's the thing. Tried a great many different directions. Michael never realized what he was interested in. No wonder. He didn't go there of his own free will. That's one. And when after training in the pool you gallop to the English course, then you take a public speaking class at the same pace. Nothing is interesting except a warm, soft bed. After a hot dinner and a cup of tea, that's two. And after high school, Michael enrolled in hotel management. And what's most interesting, he liked it very much. So maybe with business everything will not be so hopeless. He thought happily. The main thing is to be passionate about it. His parents, of course, were over the moon. Now they were sure the business would be in good hands. The guy was keen on studying, did not drink, did not smoke, not to mention anything else. Basically, he was on the right track, and that's half of success. But half. In his third year, Michael fell in love for the first time. Of course, there were kindergarten and then school hotties, but it was in the third year that the guy realized that this was his true love. Young people met at a disco in honor of the initiation into students. It all started with the fact that the girl invited Michael to a white dance. "Do you mind?" she asked cheerfully. The question was obviously rhetorical, and it was asked, it seems, with one single purpose: to make sure of his own irresistibility. And yet there would hardly be a guy in the whole institute who objected to this slender, long-legged brunette with huge, slightly slanted golden brown eyes, plump sensual lips, and straight shiny hair down to her waist. Michael nodded his head with a smile, and the young people twirled in a dance. The girl smiled enigmatically, and in the middle of the song she suddenly pressed herself against Michael as closely as if they had known each other for 1,000 years. And the relationship between them was the closest that could be between a boy and a girl. He was embarrassed and tried to pull away. "I'm sorry," the girl whispered. "I just seemed to lose my head," and pulled away. Michael was discouraged. This dark-skinned beauty had lost her head to him. No, he wasn't ugly, fat, slouchy, lame, or out for baldness. But for a strange girl, and even such a gorgeous girl, to lose her head so much that she seemed to be ready for anything. In general, April from Nice, who behaved in this way, seemed Michael available. But why not flirt? It's no big deal, he whispered back. It's even flattering. It's also so intriguing. I'm dancing with a girl. She's snuggling up to me, and I don't even know her name. And you're sure you want to know it? The beautiful girl grinned, and that grin made Michael hot. It would be nice to tease her. What then? My name is Kelly, and I'm Michael. Oh, it's official. She jokingly rolled her eyes. But it's still a pleasure. You too. The slow dance ended, giving way to a rousing tune. But Michael and Kelly kept spinning. They were being pushed. And one overly agile dancer, a tall, long-haired guy in a brightly colored t-shirt and tight jeans, managed to knock a couple off their feet. And a couple seconds later, he swung his long arms awkwardly, plopping down on top of them. Sorry, guys, I got carried away. It's okay, Michael replied, wiping his bruised thigh and offering a hand to Kelly. Wow, she laughed. It's called dancing till you drop. Yeah, sneered the culprit. But you'll excuse that again. The young man left, and Kelly offered to sit in the lobby. I have a headache, she complained. Michael nodded, suspecting that there was no headache at all. Kelly clearly wanted to get to know him better. Don't flatter yourself with irony, Michael thought. You're quite the ladies' man. But there was genuine interest in the brunette's eyes, and the guy felt that he was not flattering himself. That's right. What was he, Michael? Matthews worse than the other guys. I guess you got in this year, he asked. I've just never seen you here before. Kelly smiled at that. And you are? I'm in the third faculty. Hospitality business. No kidding. It's just that I got into hospitality too. Now I'll know who to call for help. I hope I can count on it, the girl asked flirtatiously. But of course, grinned Michael, suddenly feeling experienced, seduce. And it didn't matter that it didn't correspond to reality. Apparently, these things happen to themselves. He also had the unfortunate thought that Kelly looked a little older than a freshman was supposed to. What's old? She asked with a chuckle. Michael winked, as if his thoughts were being eavesdropped on. But why the awkwardness? Mumbled the boy. Do you look okay? You're an idiot. Good. Yeah, she looks divine. I meant to say yes. I know you meant to say fun, laughed Kelly. And as for my age, I'm in my 20s. I didn't say anything about your age, Michael noted. But he thought shrewdly, though. He thought, why would I need to know her age? The new acquaintance lived in a dormitory. And that evening, she invited Michael to her room for a cup of tea. She winked slyly. The guy was finally convinced that Kelly was an uninhibited girl and decided that she was the one he needed. It was not their last meeting. The heir to the Matthews couple was crazy about the passionate beauty and was not ready to part with her. At first, Michael thought it was more like a simple affair. Too frankly, Kelly coquettes at the disco. But what happened next was not at all like a serious relationship. But Kelly had an opinion about that. If two people realize that they want each other, what difference does it make when it happens in 2 o'clock or in 2 weeks? Some people procrastinate for months to prolong the intrigue, and then it turns out they're not right for each other. Frankly, Michael never gave it much thought. It was a given for him. Two people walking around holding hands, and only after a certain amount of time do they get to know each other more intimately. But I don't like the rituals, the candy bouquet, the period, and all that nonsense, she said. So the guy has had his day and won't give the girl a flower or a tiny chocolate bar again. But I gave you one. Aha, Kelly said in a satisfied voice. What did you have to prove? It doesn't make any difference now or in an hour. Michael liked that his new friend had her own opinions on everything, usually scathing, but generally correct, as it was called, not in the eye, but in the eye. He had never thought about many things before he met Kelly. She is unlike anyone else. Michael thought of her with delight. After a month, he realized he had fallen in love like a sixth grader. Reaching for his rapture, Michael was ready to lay the whole world at Kelly's feet. But since the whole world at Michael's disposal was not, the guy gave her flowers, took her to movies, cafes, saunas, and clubs. He spent almost all his time with Kelly. And one day Ethan said, "At least introduce us to his girlfriend. It'd be interesting to see what kind of a marvelous, for which you forgot about everything in the world." "Why would I forget?" "What do you mean?" "Why?" My father snorted. "You only come home at night. You come home at 0 o'clock. You're always flying around in the clouds. In the rare moments when your mother and I do see you, you're always thinking about something, smiling and looking stupid and so stupid, so very stupid." Ethan winked. "Kelly, how would you like to meet my parents?" "Are you sure?" Rounded eyes. "Well, since I'm suggesting it, I'm sure." Michael laughed. "Sweetheart, it's okay. My parents asked me to introduce you to them. What if they didn't like me?" "Oh, honey, the main thing is that I like you cheerfully," he muttered. "And then I'm sure they'll like you." "But I'm not so much," the girl muttered. "I don't recognize you. Where did your self-confidence go?" "I don't know," Kelly shrugged. "I guess all girls get a bit of a chip on their shoulder. When it comes to meeting the parents, don't worry, I'm with you," he said. To Kelly, that phrase sounded not only trite, but also extremely unconvincing. After all, in their relationship she played the first violin. The client seemed to have matured in an impassive voice, reported on one end of the wire. "Good," the subscriber rejoiced, and having listened to the report, said that almost half of the case is done, but it is almost clear what I mean. "How much clearer?" "And if he doesn't?" "Well, that's your problem." "Kelly, who are your parents?" Adriana asked. "My parents?" She asked. "My parents live abroad in England, and you decided to stay here." The landlady was a little surprised. "Yes, I mean, no. Anyway, they're there temporarily." "Mom, but Kelly is studying here," Michael intervened. Yes, of course." Adriana nodded and stared at the guest. "Kelly, why don't you try the chicken with salt and vegetables and white sauce?" Ethan suggested in an unreal social tone. "I'd love to." Kelly replied with a dazzling smile. Ethan studied the hotel news and currency exchange rates while his wife removed her makeup. "She's kind of slippery." She broke the silence. "Adriana, what are you talking about?" "Husband." "It's not what, it's who." With a sigh, she clarified. "And our son's friend. This Kelly. She didn't seem suspicious to you." "Well, a little," Ethan admitted. Adriana exclaimed a little. "Yeah, she's fake through and through. It's not clear where the truth is and where the lies are. And is there any truth in what she says?" "Well, you mother, you give," shook his head husband. "Where do you get such conclusions?" "Oh, Ethan, are all men so blind?" Perplexed, she asked. "You can't see further than your nose, but Michael's all right. He's head over heels in love, and it's going to take a lot of hard work to prove the obvious to him. But you've always been a cool thinker." "I guess I really don't understand something," Ethan said thoughtfully. "I don't know. Take my question about my parents. Did you see the way her eyes went wide?" "That's just it. What's the big deal?" I asked. "Well, you know, maybe she doesn't have a good relationship with her parents, so she doesn't want to talk about them." "Very possibly," Adriana agreed, settling into bed next to her husband. "But that's her yes. I mean no." And then this girl remembered that her parents were supposedly temporarily living abroad. "No, Ethan, I'm sensing something fishy here." "Yeah, you're probably right, husband. So maybe we should run her down. I'll call Christopher tomorrow. See if he can dig up anything interesting. You know, Ethan, something tells me it's a last resort." Adriana said slowly and confessed. "I have a bad feeling about this." "Oh boy. Why would that be?" "I don't know, but it's definitely there." You're just getting yourself worked up, said Ethan. He put his arm around his wife's shoulder and kissed her on the temple. Good, if that's the case, she sighed. So how's it going? Asked the big, brutal-looking man. It would be all right, but his mother can confuse all the cards. Not a woman, but an X-ray. Kelly sighed, settling down on his mighty chest. Dan, the big guy, came out. I don't feel like going to extreme measures, you know. It's a little early, and I don't want to show my face. What do we do then? Do what? With a chuckle, he asked again. Are you asking me? Smoothly led his Romero to talk about family life. And of course, pleasing him. How can you do that? The man chuckled. And Kelly erupted. Christopher, what's my star? I said something wrong. I think it's all business. Aren't you jealous? Sad? She asked. It's business, baby, Christopher replied admonishingly. And I suggest you treat it the same way. And all that, leave it to the losers. You better think of a way to get that chick to propose to you. He's actually talking about getting married. And he said he's gonna propose to me when he graduates, answered Kelly and winked. Although I think Michael is ready to get married tomorrow. Christopher smiled and said with a deep smile, perhaps I should reconsider. I could get jealous. I'll be glad. You and I will be glad, he promised. But let's get back to the chick. Kelly giggled. Yeah, so you're saying Michael's ready to get married tomorrow? I think he is. But he won't. Okay, so we have to make him get married. How? Oh, I have to teach you everything. Don't tell me you don't know it. The old-fashioned way women lure men into marriage. Michael, there's something I need to tell you. They were sitting in a cafe near the Institute, having coffee and cakes. I'm listening to you carefully. Michael smiled. Anyway, shit. I didn't realize it was so complicated. Kelly said in a confused voice, and lowered her eyes. What's the big deal? It's just that I'm pregnant. She flipped through it and smiled awkwardly. That's just the way it is. So what's the problem? And Michael smiled cheerfully back. Nothing terrible has happened. My favorite girl is expecting a child. And now we'll get married. We're getting married, Kelly asked incredulously. But you said you had to study, get on your feet, and only then think about children. Well, I did, the boy nodded. But circumstances have changed. Anyway, Kelly, marry me. I'm sorry I don't have a ring. Sorry. That means, yes, Kelly nodded. So this calls for a celebration, exclaimed the newly wedded groom. But her beloved shook her head. Michael, my darling, we will celebrate. But now I'm running away to the dorm tomorrow to learn a lot. You understand? The first course. I understand, he nodded. What's my cramming? Then I'll walk you out. But not with a smile, Kelly shook her head. I still have to run to the library. If you say so. I think I'll order another coffee. 0 o'clock studying. I'm sleepy. I can't sleep. Oh, you poor thing. Sympathetically stretched out the girl and took a bite. Michael on the cheek left the cafe, and the happy groom headed for the distribution. If he had looked back, he might well have seen Kelly heading in the opposite direction from the dormitory. Christopher, congratulate me, solemnly announced the new daughter-in-law of the country hotel owners. Michael proposed to me, and I had no doubt about it, he replied, rubbing his hands together happily. So this is something to celebrate. What do you think? Are they in cahoots or what? Grinned to herself. And out loud she said, that's a wonderful idea. And what do I mean? Christopher smiled, taking a bottle of expensive champagne, glasses, and a box of chocolates from the bar. He poured the champagne into glasses and said, but to family happiness. Why are you a bride? It's a sad joke. You imagined it. Yeah, maybe. Anyway, I heard somewhere that brides tend to get nervous before the wedding. So it's a lie. I guess so, Kelly said thoughtfully. Yeah, Christopher nodded. You'll invite me to the wedding. And as what? Asked the bride. That's a good question. But say, as a godfather. Why? Because that's essentially what it was. And it was true. Nancy Kazantseva grew up in a dysfunctional family. From the very early childhood, she saw nothing but dirt, the stench of perpetually drunken parents, fights, foul language, and marginalized people who in their house were not outnumbered. Every day there was a new character. Drunken parties usually lasted until the last guest left, that is, until morning. And Nancy didn't get much sleep. It was very hard for her to concentrate on her lessons, and the girl had a hard time mastering the material. It turned out that Nancy skipped classes because there was no one to wake her up. The result was 2 years into 5th grade when Nancy turned 12. Her father left this world before passing away. Liam, or Liam the Rusty as he was known for his fiery red mustache, drank for 2 whole weeks. When the valiant police and paramedics found many empty liquor bottles in the house, the precinct officer shook his head. It's strange that he didn't move 10 days ago. So much to drink. And judging by the smell, it's a hell of a mixture. The whole Mendeleev table. Liam Rusty's funeral was attended by all the local folk. Their private sector had its own elite. Good was a man, wiping away tears, said a spoiled woman of no certain age with impressive bags under the eyes and a dewy red nose. And a nail to hammer in will help, and on a bottle always borrowed. I mean borrowed. Sleep well, Liam. May you rest in peace. And the woman said in a bad voice. From the outside one could think that she had lost a close person, and only the daughter of the deceased sitting quietly in the corner knew that it was so. After the funeral of the head of the family, Nancy's mother went on a bender. Vanessa had left the house more than once for days at a time, and she didn't care one bit. Her daughter. And what would she wear to school? The poor girl was laughed at all the time. Nancy was called the daughter of an alcoholic and other bad words that meant that her mother was not only abusing alcohol. Over time, Nancy learned to ignore it. After all, she had no reason to be ashamed of herself. Yes, her mother drank and was not known for being picky. But after all, it wasn't Nancy's fault in any way. Children are not responsible for their parents. By the time she was 16, Nancy was a real beauty. Guys started looking at her, and girls started joking about her. She'd become just like her mom. Nancy swallowed it, and that only hurt. She wasn't really interested in boys, like most girls forced to grow up early. They seemed small to Nancy, and when she had seen him for the first time as an adult, she had realized that she preferred older men. That older man turned out to be a friend of one of her mother's suitors. That evening, Jacob had had too much to drink and called his buddy to pick him up while waiting for a sober driver. Vanessa and her lover secluded themselves in the bedroom, and Nancy settled down on the terrace with a cup of tea. To the amazement of the girlfriend, Jacob arrived in an expensive car. Could drunks really have friends in such cars? She wondered, looking at the impressive Jeep, and when the man got out of the car, she was even more surprised. He was dressed in a light-colored or other suit and what appeared to be a brand-name t-shirt. When the man approached Nancy, the girl embarrassedly lowered her eyes and saw dazzling white sneakers clearly from the same price segment. And this is a friend of Jacob's. Did he have the wrong address? Sorry, I did not get the wrong address, as if guessed her thoughts. Asked the man of Krasnodar. 11. That's right. Yes, nodded Nancy. You must be here to pick up Jacob. Yes, nodded the visitor with dignity. The man smelled of expensive perfume, tobacco, and something else that confused the girl even more. I'll call him hurriedly, she said, and she dashed into the house. Nancy caught her breath and knocked on the bedroom door. Jacob is here for you, she said in a voice that didn't sound like her own. Together they walked Uncle Vasia to the car, and when the man who had come for Vanessa's drinking companion sat down behind the wheel, he suddenly looked at Nancy attentively. The look of Jacob's friend threw her first into heat and then into cold. But maybe she had taken wishful thinking for granted, and no look had actually happened. A few days later, the man visited the Kazantsevs again. When Nancy saw out the window the familiar Jeep, her heart pounded. So it seemed that it was about to pierce her chest. Yes, and go into free flight. And noticing the bouquet of tea roses in the man's hands, Nancy frowned. Had this respectable man set his eyes on her mother? And what was it? Perplexed, the girl thought. And when she realized she was jealous, she was horrified. He must be over 30, which by the standards of an 18-year-old girl means almost old age. Hello, he greeted Nancy. Hello, the girl replied discreetly, trying hard to appear calm. And my mom is not home. I'm not here to see your mom, smiled the man, holding out the flowers to Nancy. Do you like these? They are very beautiful, Nancy said, embarrassed. I've never been given flowers before. How old are you? The man chuckled. With such beauty. By the way, what is the name of one of the most beautiful girls of our city? Would you say she sparkled too? There are so many beauties in the city that the eyes are scattered, and me. And you just don't know your own value. In the city you say they're not beautiful, but spectacular. But you have real beauty from nature. So what's your name? Nancy blushed, the girl answered. But I'm Christopher. Let's get acquainted. And I've come to invite you to a restaurant. I'm going to a restaurant, Nancy exclaimed in amazement. You and you to the restaurant. Christopher confirmed with a smile. What's so surprising about me wanting to take a beautiful girl to a restaurant? Probably nothing, she replied, thinking. Only I don't have anything to go in. That's not a problem, the man assured her. Now we'll go through all the stores and buy you dresses, and there's shoes and jewelry and everything else. I don't even know, Nancy said at a loss. But why on earth would this flamboyant gentleman invite a girl from a family of alcoholics to a restaurant? Nancy was. Surely it is worth to this Bogachev only to whistle. All the most beautiful, spectacular women of the city will run away. Or doesn't she realize something? Afraid, Christopher stated. I do. I mean, we're practically strangers. But I assure you, I'm not doing you any harm. It's just that I liked you. And I wanted to get to know you better. I apologize if I've been intrusive. Well, I agree, Nancy interrupted. That trip was the beginning of an affair. A week later, Nancy moved into Christopher's luxurious 4-bedroom apartment. Vanessa breathed a sigh of relief. No one would be cramping her freedom now. Not spoiled by life. The girl was over the moon. The new life was a paradise. Christopher swamped Nancy with gifts, took her to restaurants for parties, took her to Spain for a week. Besides, he didn't go out, he didn't drink with his buddies, and for a month he never once raised his voice to Nancy. Why didn't you go to school anywhere? Asked Christopher once. I applied to technical school, but I didn't pass shyly, answered the girl. I see, nodded he. And for whom, if it's not a secret? On the secretary. Oh yeah. And why exactly on the secretary? It's not too high, he shrugged. It's not too high. Yeah, but what about the higher ones? No chance at all. No, Nancy replied nonchalantly. I didn't do well in school. I even had to repeat a year once. But that's okay, Christopher chuckled. There would be a desire to learn with this how. The desire is there. That's good. I'll take care of your education. You'll still graduate from my institute, he assured. I'll go to college. No, I can't. I say you can. There's nothing unrealistic. You'll see, you and me will make it. You and me. Those words sounded like music to Nancy. Well, he was the kind of man you could only dream of. Only he wouldn't marry her. But she thought it was only a matter of time. Alas, she was wrong. Before Nancy knew it, she and Christopher had been living together for 2 months. One morning, when Nancy was preparing breakfast for her beloved, she received a phone call from her neighbor, Aunt Olga, who was almost the only non-drinking woman in the neighborhood. Trouble. Nancy reread. Vanessa was gone. What happened? I got cold. Nancy turns out the mother fell asleep drunk with a cigarette, causing their dilapidated house to burst into flames like a cardboard box. Talking to a neighbor, Nancy found her hands shaking. The girl couldn't say she loved her mother much. And for what? for not having a normal childhood, for the ridicule that Nancy had to endure at her mercy. In that moment, however, she forgave her mother everything. Vanessa was gone, and now she would answer for all her sins before God. All expenses associated with the grief clap were borne by Christopher. The fairy tale ended as swiftly as it had begun. "Time to pay off the debts," he said one day. "What debts?" Nancy's brow furrowed in bewilderment. "What debts?" "Beauty parlors, shopping, doping, and all the other ladies' tricks, and finally, seeing your car off for the last time. All of which, as you realize, costs money." "But Sunshine, I am not Mother Teresa or Santa Claus," nonchalantly said Christopher. "But you know I don't have any money of my own." Humiliated flew the girl. "No, you will. But you have a cute face and a cool figure. And you're a real piece of work when it comes to love. I'll tell you that much. And if you use it wisely, you'll have a beautiful life. Do you want to give me to a brothel?" she asked in horror. Christopher laughed out loud. "My doll, where did you get such thoughts? Narrow-minded princess. You're a one-of-a-kind item. Not for drunken sauna-goers. There's a whole world out there waiting for you. A new life and a new name." Nancy stared at her roommate in incomprehension. "Let's go to my office," he said. "This is the ticket to your new life," Christopher said, handing her a dark burgundy book, which on closer inspection turned out to be a passport in the name of Marlowe and Kelly. "But that's me," Nancy said confusedly, seeing the girl's face in the photo. "Of course it is. You confirmed henceforth you are Marlowe Kelly. I told you that you are starting a new life under a new name. And I'm giving you a job." "What kind of job?" "Now we're talking business. What should I call your job title?" "I'll formulate the hell out of it. I can't think of anything. But an errand clerk sounds good to me. Or maybe—" Nancy didn't argue. So Kelly's starting to realize what she's gotten herself into. She was too confused by the word specific, and in general. "What was I saying?" Christopher rejoiced, ignoring the expression on Nancy Kelly's face. "Read the job description." "No, I can't." The girl shook her head. Having listened to the job description, according to this, so to speak, document, Kelly was to be a con artist, for which all means are good, and when it came to a young and beautiful girl, she didn't even want to think about it. "You can," Christopher said in an icy voice. "You were able to accept gifts from me and go to restaurants, weren't you? And so we don't waste any time. Let's start working today." As already today, Kelly asked in a lowered voice. She was afraid to even guess what she would have to do. What was there to look forward to? "Fun," asked the employer. "You start sooner, you learn sooner, and you learn sooner, you learn faster. Consider me, and you will become an independent and self-sufficient lady with education. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten. The kid said the kid did the kid did the kid. Besides, I'll give you some of the money in hand. But you have to dress up, take care of yourself. It's a profession." Christopher playfully pecked the girl's cheek, and at that moment Kelly realized she had no choice. "Serves you right. The fool did her worst torture. Thought you got it all for the pretty eyes. So let's work it off. Everything has to be paid for, especially pleasure." And now the first task. Christopher spoke in the tone of a strict but kind and fair teacher. Kelly sighed and prepared to listen. "There is in our glorious city one major, someone else slacker and idler." Sebastian began. He outlined the task. John Korov owns several parking lots in the city. The father of this very son was one of Christopher's main competitors. As for his son Sebastian, a young hustler, the guy was a lover of love for sale. That's where the game was to be played. The fact that John ran for mayor of the city and his biography should be perfect. A son who likes to spend time with a love maid. What nonsense. The plan was for Christopher Sebastian to order a call girl who turns out to be Kelly. Christopher's people take photos of their playdates, and then it's a matter of technique. In this case, blackmail. And if John does not get off the track, the racy photos will fall into the hands of those who should not see them. The result is a scandal with all the consequences. The customer is a serious man, so it is very important not to justify. Finished with the instruction. No, I cannot. Snickly Kelly no, so after all, my darling on no and no judgment. Divorced Christopher. If you have the opportunity to pay me with a bill or a bank transfer, I'm all for it. Do you have any? No, she sighed. Then what are we talking about? Christopher had connections almost everywhere, including among pimps. Korov Jr. was a regular customer of all the offices, which meant that Christopher had every chance to realize his plan. And so it happened. 3 days after this conversation, Christopher received a phone call from a familiar mom, and the deal took place. And then there was a scam with the wife of Kelly's alleged lover. The girl showed up at the spouse's house and said she was dating her lover. And if you do not want those who are not supposed to know about Ivan's adventures, pay $100, said Kelly. The woman, unaware that her husband and the blackmailer did not even know each other, instantly paid the demanded amount. Since the time, Kel felt more confident. She was used to a new name, a new life, a new self. Now it seemed to Kelly that there was no Nancy Kazantsev. Living in the private sector of her parents' death was only Christopher in their business. In odd, Kelly caught herself thinking that she believed in the legends that he presented to his victims. Did Kellen feel sorry for these people? She had no clear answer to that question. On the one hand, yes, when Kel was talking nonsense with an honest expression on her face, she felt uncomfortable. Keep it simple, Christopher advised. It's better to think about the fact that some people have everything and others have nothing. Some have life on a plate, and some have to work their asses off and deal with problems all the time. You think I'd always lived like this? No, you haven't. I'm an orphan. You never talked about it. There was no reason to. And I didn't. I shrugged. And now he was shocked. It always seemed to the girl that the employer's roommate was a guy from a well-to-do family. Surprisingly, but after Christopher revealed to Kelly this part of his biography, he became closer to her. As a matter of fact, the close relationship was still going strong. But Christopher and Kelly became to each other more like good buddies, or in the depths of her soul, somewhere at the very bottom, close anger and love. And so 2 years passed. Remember, I was talking about your education. Frankly, she'd forgotten all about it. Moreover, Kelly now had little idea of herself as a student. I remember, she nodded. What's this? I think it's a good time to think about education. Besides, you're going to have to make the best of a bad situation. What's that? Kelly asked. It's like this. There's a guy named Michael Matthews at Polytechnic. The guy is mastering the hotel business, and it's no coincidence that his parents own a country hotel. And you, my princess, are to marry him, she marveled. Yes, I thought I made myself clear. You must marry him. But why? And this is already a business conversation, Christopher rejoiced. And the purpose of your marriage is simple, to get the apartment. But agree, you cannot live in my apartment all the time. So I'm letting you go. You set up your life and everything. Actually, Kelly was happy to live with Christopher. And she saw her life with him, no matter what the situation. She loved him more than life, and she couldn't help it. But she had to marry him, Kelly muttered. We do, Christopher nodded. Personally, I can see only one way to hit the apartment. Live there for 6 months. Then you file for divorce and voila. The apartment's all yours. But after the divorce, the apartment is usually forfeited, Kelly pointed out. You're smart, he said approvingly. You're changing the apartment. Unprofitable for your Supreminko. We under whom it is necessary. Well, what if there will be other applicants for the apartment? What applicants? No, but if you decide to have a baby, then sure. What a joke you're making. One thing I'm not going to do anytime soon. It's having a baby. I'm talking about his parents. What's his parents got to do with it? Christopher snorted. You don't think his parents are going to buy the newlyweds an apartment with their $1 million? Kelly, good point. Everything's gonna be just right. You'll be married to the sole heir to a wealthy man. You'll be rolling in the dough. Aha. Unless I'm married to the wrong person, Kelly thought bitterly. Oh my God. It's about time. The man I love is marrying me off. I don't care if his parents were 3 times as wealthy. Christopher, wake up. I don't want anyone but you. Don't you realize that? Okay. Well, what are we unhappy about? Christopher asked with a sigh. It's business, baby. It's nothing personal, yeah, she said quietly and repeated thoughtfully. It's nothing personal. Exactly. Oh yes, tomorrow we're going to apply to the Polytechnic Institute for the hotel business department. We'll make a cultured and educated lady out of you, winked the employer. Kelly couldn't sleep that night. She expected anything but this. No, Kelly, of course, had long ago realized that Christopher had no tender feelings for her. But this, yes, was a real spit in the face. Take it easy. She remembered Christopher's words. Kelly had a way of doing that, but not this time. Why are you so stupid? Angrily, she said, not even realizing she was speaking out loud. He doesn't need you. It's finally stupid. Kelly looked at Christopher. He was sleeping sweetly and probably had his 10th dream. And the girl decided that her marriage was not the worst idea. What if Christopher realizes he's lost Kelly and wants her back? It's a long shot, but that's what life is all about. Christopher took Kelly to a restaurant after she applied to the institute. But here's to a fresh start. Christopher smiled, raising his wine glass. Aha, she said languidly. You're taking it to the next level. Edifyingly, he said. Aha. Yeah, something took over. Aha. Aha. Christopher exclaimed. What's wrong with that? Did you know what you were getting into? I did. Kelly, but you're what you call a professional. So be one. Yeah, sure, I nodded. She's picking at her meat salad. There was no appetite at all. No matter how much Kelly tried to convince herself that this marriage would only benefit her, her soul desperately protested. This is it, Kelly thought, when she saw her name on the enrollment list. The machine had already been started, so it was too late. Michael Matthews was easy to charm. He's obviously inexperienced, Kelly thought. If he'd ever had a girlfriend, he didn't have much to brag about. Kelly suddenly felt like a femme fatale, and everything went according to plan. But the marriage proposal was still a long shot. And no wonder, because Michael was still a student and therefore could not offer anything to his potential wife. Cool, you said he is so good with you calmly, honestly. I would marry you even today. But first the institute, and then everything else. Well, that was to be expected. But Christopher demanded immediate results. So they had to use the heavy artillery, a non-existent pregnancy. Kelly was disgusted, but what could she do? The amount of debt was too high. Of course, the thought of not filing for divorce crossed her mind. And move on with Michael. But Christopher wasn't to be trifled with. 6 months at the most, he said. Like he was cutting it off. Letting Kelly know that trick wasn't gonna work. And she'd grown attached to Michael. Kelly felt a little sorry for him at times, the only heir to the Matthews fortune. He was just a kid. The chick had spoken contemptuously of him to Christopher, and in general was not far from the truth. But Kelly was uncomfortable with the feeling she had for Michael. It was like a mother's. And what mother would like it when someone spoke ill of her child? Besides, the girls at the institute were jealous of Kelly. Had they known, as for her feelings for Christopher, they, to her deepest regret, remained the same. However, the thought that the lover may realize who he lost firmly lodged in her head. The main thing is that the news that Kelly is pregnant should lead to a logical conclusion. Although, of course, closure was out of the question. After all, this was just the beginning. When Kelly had informed Michael that she was pregnant, she had felt like the ultimate asshole. Even though he'd said he was prioritizing his studies right now, he wasn't going to shirk his responsibilities. But how would Michael's parents feel about it? He assured them everything would be fine. But Kelly, unlike her fiancé, had no illusions and was absolutely right. You proposed to her. Adriana was furious. You're out of your mind. Since when is willingness to take responsibility a sign of insanity? The son asked with a wry chuckle. Kelly is pregnant, and as an honest man, I'm obliged to marry her. What's wrong? Everything is wrong. The mother cut him off. Kelly is a girl out of our league. But you know, mother, we're not of the Earl's class either. Besides, what's wrong with Kelly? She's pretty. She's studying. She's thinking about her future. Yeah, I can see how she thinks. Adriana. And you've been dreaming a lot about marrying a fool like you. But you don't know her at all, Michael. You've only seen her once, and such conclusions. Admit it, you were just jealous. Perhaps, Adriana admitted. She couldn't help admitting that she was. But that's not the point. She's kind of shady, and she's acting suspicious. Personally, I haven't noticed anything. But then again, my mother would have been sarcastic. You're in love. That's the point. Oh, Michael, I don't want to talk about it anymore. In time, you'll see that I'm right. Mother, no matter what you say now, I'm still going to marry Kelly. With an uncharacteristic firmness, Michael said. After all, I'm of age. You're the one who taught me to stand my ground. So you taught me to stand my ground. When did he grow up? Thought Adriana, who had only ever seen a guy who wasn't decisive. This guy didn't know what he wanted out of life. Now he seems to know. He's also learned to stand his ground. Do whatever you want. Adriana waved his hand. Don't say you weren't warned. Okay, I won't, Michael promised. And I also wanted to be civil, so there's no talk of the Matthews hiding their only son's wedding. We'll have an engagement party to which our business partners will be invited. In Michael's opinion, it was prejudice. Who cares about his wedding? But I didn't argue. People, as you realize, are respectable, continued his mother. So I want your Kelly to hope for a little more decorum. No cleavage and slits to the navel. I do not want to blush for the future daughter-in-law. That's a little over the top. The mother clearly wanted to humiliate Kelly. Kelly had nothing but good taste, but Michael chose not to be provoked. For better or worse. But he and his mother had a deal. So was it worth teasing the geese? All right, Michael nodded. But as long as it's good, you can apply tomorrow. And on Saturday, the engagement party announced her plans to Adriana, and remembering, she added, oh, yes, the bride's parents' attendance is mandatory. Kelly took one last look in the mirror and was pleased with her reflection. She had never looked so beautiful. 300 hours at the salon had not gone to waste. The masseur, hairdresser, and makeup artist had done their best. The outfit was also above all praise and fully met the requirements of the future mother-in-law. Strictly evening dress protected the luxurious figure of Kelly, but at the same time did not reveal anything superfluous. Her breasts were covered, but everyone could notice how beautiful her collarbones were. Chic golden tan, obtained in the best tanning salon in the city, perfectly harmonized makeup in uncomfortable colors. Upon seeing the bride, Michael opened his mouth. These daughters of parents' business partners to heaven. With pride, he thought, she has, unlike these silicone, thick, different hair and eyelashes, natural beauty. Michael had not thought to pass on to Kelly his mother's words about how she should dress. Firstly, he was afraid of offending, and secondly, he knew that the bride would not hit the dirt. Vile and tasteless. Not Kelly. Kelly, you're charming, Ethan said gallantly. He kissed the girl's hand. Thank you for the compliment. She was checking, noticing out of the corner of her eye Adriana's unkind look. Kelly grinned to herself. The future mother-in-law clearly expected her to be vulgar, but not on that attack. The male half of the invitees kept their eyes on Kelly. The ladies present wrinkled their brows, but she was having fun. You think you've got the world in your pocket? I thought, Kelly, about businessmen's wives and business ladies. No way, no amount of plastic surgery can make you look any older than you are. At that moment, Kelly felt like a queen. Thoughts about Christority retreated not even to the second, and unknown to what plan. and the girl thought for the last few days for the umpteenth time that everything was not so bad. How many girls dream of being in her shoes? That's just it. Kelly, your parents didn't even fly in for your daughter's engagement party. In a fake sympathetic tone, Adriana asked. No, they didn't, she replied. They have a lot of work to do. That's how the lady of the house supposedly nodded understandingly. But I hope they'll be at the wedding. Yes, of course. Kelly nodded politely, wondering where she would get her parents. That's fine. Ethan intervened. Let's have a toast to our future family. That's a great idea, the wife exclaimed. How was the engagement? Christopher asked. It was fine, shrugged Kelly. True, the future mother-in-law so from Pavliev me a look. But otherwise everything is very good. Men drooled, their wives were angry. In short, everything in the best traditions of secular society. There's more to come, smiled the benefactor. There will be more, sighed Anna Christopher. There's a little problem. On all ears, Michael's mother keeps talking about my parents. The first time we met, she asked who they were and what they did. Well, did you tell her they live abroad? They have a business there. Is that right? Approvingly, Christopher nodded. Then what's the problem? Yes, Adriana asked me about my parents too, which made me wonder if she suspected something. And then today, she asked about them again. Like I hope my parents will be at the wedding, Christopher said thoughtfully. I don't know what the hell that's about, but I don't like it at all. Yeah, well, whatever. We'll solve problems as they come. In the meantime, okay, you'll have parents. Kelly's parents turned out to be solid-looking people. The role of the bride's father was played by a man about 45 years old. According to Christopher, they pulled more than one case for the role of the mother of the newlyweds and invited a beautiful, slender brunette about the same age. Kelly, don't you think you look like a mother? Christopher winked as he introduced them. She looked at the woman closely and found that Christopher was right. The resemblance was indeed there. The woman had been a theater actress in the past, and her name was Christina. Rumbled the swarm so no one would know for sure, and everything would go off in the best possible way. The marriage of Michael and Kelly took place on New Year's Eve. Past the session, go on a wedding trip, Ethan said. Thailand. The wedding did go off without a hitch. It couldn't have been otherwise. Christopher Kelly and her parents had planned every detail and thought of everything. What business are they engaged in? Where did they meet? What Kelly was like as a child, and so on. Christopher also attended the wedding and introduced himself as the bride's godfather. The parents of the groom sort of calmed down, but Kelly was wondering what would happen next. In Thailand, the newlyweds went on excursions, but most often just walked around and went to local restaurants. Kelly was surprised to realize that she liked spending time with Michael on vacation. He's different, she thought. Michael had had to vacation in Thailand before, so he was only too happy to work as a personal guide for his beautiful wife. The only thing that embarrassed Kelly was having to pretend to be pregnant. She burst through more than once to tell her husband that no child they will not have. But Michael had been so touching in his concern for her. Plus, there's no telling how he'd react to being lied to. And more importantly, for what purpose? 2 weeks of vacation flew by like a day. Kelly hated to go back. She also felt sorry for Michael. She felt sorry for herself too. How are you looking? Christopher winked playfully at Pauline. The honeymoon's been good for you. Watch out, I'll get jealous. And Kelly suddenly realized with amazement that she did not care. It wasn't that long ago that she'd been wishing she did. Christopher had really lost me, Kelly thought. In every way. If it weren't for this stupid assignment, why aren't you being affectionate? Christopher squinted. Come on, admit it. Did you swim? That's out of the question. Remember who you are and who they are. I remember everything perfectly. Cold, she said. Well, don't forget. I wish I knew what to do about pregnancy, Kelly sighed. A pillow. Why a pillow? Good of you to bring it up. By the way, nodded Christopher. So you're thinking about the case. Well, that's commendable. What about the pregnancy? I faked a miscarriage. Like I know what that's like. What's the internet for? The miscarriage was almost a joke, but Christopher fixed it. The problem was solved with two $10 bills. You're a human orchestra, Kelly said to her patron, but he only waved it off. He was more concerned about something else. When would Matthews buy the newlyweds an apartment? It was out of the question. Kelly disappointed him. They'd said something about buying us an apartment when Michael graduated, and Christopher grumbled no better. So there's no way to influence them. I wonder how. The circus on Lanyo. Ethan, it's okay. My mother-in-law can't stand me. Can you do anything about it? My darling Christopher. And why would you want to influence them directly? I understand that your husband is crazy about you, or am I wrong? No, Kelly blushed. Then what's the point? The point is that it seems to be mutual. No, it's not about anything. With a sigh, the young woman shook her head. Well, I'll try to influence Michael. I won't, Christopher said stiffly. I will. All right, I will, Kelly said obediently. It's been 3 months. Unfortunately, it's easier said than done. One day, Kelly told her husband that it would be a good idea to get an apartment and live separately. Get an apartment? Michael was surprised. What's the need? But we could be alone together more. The young wife smiled slyly. Yes, we seem to have it pretty good now, he remarked. That's true. There were 5 rooms in the Matthews apartment. Ethan and Adriana worked late. Plus, they traveled a lot. Anyway, it wasn't much of an argument. Well, I don't like coming out of the bathroom in a towel and running into your father in the hallway, said Kelly another time. And Adriana doesn't like it. I wish we had a separate apartment. Kelly actually ran into Ethan in the hallway. Only once was she actually wearing the same towel. She wasn't naked. Michael had his hands full. That's right. And the father-in-law only delicately averted his eyes. Adriana seemed to trust her husband. Otherwise, she would have long ago judged her son and daughter-in-law far away. In short, Kelly was forced to admit that this argument was not good for anything either. Harewell, be patient for a couple of years, and we will have a separate apartment, Michael exhorted her. Parents promised. And to rent it. Agree, not an option. You and I are still studying. I don't have money for a rented place. I don't want to ask my parents. You're right, Kelly thought sadly. But you have no idea who you're dealing with. She wanted to howl with longing and hopelessness. I don't know. How can I influence Michael? In despair, she said to Christopher. Well, I don't know. That's all. I tell Michael that I want to live with him separately. And he says, we don't have the money to rent a place. So let him know you're not interested in rented accommodation. The patron spread his hands. But it's not even better, Kelly exclaimed. And how do you envision it? Honey, let your parents buy us an apartment, but you have to admit, that's crazy. What if he said, let your parents do it, too? Why? I mean, they're wealthy. Yes, Christopher said thoughtfully. I guess you're right. Okay, I have an idea. It was said with military menace, and Kelly became alert. What kind of idea? Ma'am. You'll know a lot. You'll be old soon enough. The newlyweds' life went on as usual. Ethan and Adriana had grown accustomed to their daughter-in-law, and slowly but surely, things were getting better between them. Kelly's parents supposedly traveled back overseas, but visited the Matthews before they left. The first time, Adriana graciously invited them to dinner. Mrs. Matthews, who has long dreamed of going international, transparently hinted at doing business together. We will think about it with dignity, Noah promised. The second visit was made on the occasion of the arrival of the young people from their wedding trip. My new life consists of a lot of lies, Kelly concluded. A sad conclusion. She couldn't wait to get out of it, but something told her it wouldn't end well. Her intuition was not fooling Kelly. So this is it, my children. Adriana announced at breakfast. Tomorrow we're going on vacation for a month. So for a month you're going to be masters of this place. And where did you get shot at? As we were leaving, Michael was curious. Montenegro. Cool. Yeah, my mother smiled. And to say 2 years of hard work. The next day, as Michael sat in the library, his phone rang. It was his father. Yes, Dad, hello. How may I address you? It was asked in a man's voice. I'm Michael Matthews, he replied, coldly. It was clear that something terrible had happened to his parents. You are the son of Matthews Ethan and Adriana, the voice clarified. Yes, that's right. Michael is with you. This is Police Major Mason. I'm very sorry, but your parents were killed in a traffic accident. I'm so sorry for your loss. Michael was terrified and couldn't say a word. And Major Mason asked Michael if you could come up for a lineup. Yes, of course, he said sadly. Come where? Write down the address. Kelly cried when she heard about the death of her husband's parents. She couldn't believe it. And not just that. The young woman was afraid to think about it. But it was obvious. Okay, I have an idea. Christopher's voice haunted Kelly everywhere, at home, at the Institute, at the morgue where she'd volunteered to go with the grief-stricken Michael, and at the cemetery. Yeah, he's a scary man, she thought. And that's the man I loved. How could I be any better? If Michael hadn't met me, would his parents still be alive? Not if I hadn't met that monster. Yeah, I should have run like hell to get away from him. After the wake, Michael told Irina about his childhood, about how he didn't go to school and protest, and her heart burst with pity. She had never imagined it would end so horribly. At times, Kelly hoped she was wrong. After all, there are coincidences. And 3 days later, Christopher called. Come over, he said. I have to talk to him. Okay, I'll be there in an hour, Kelly sighed. I thought with a sinking feeling that now I'd know for sure. Michael, I'm gonna go get the groceries, she told her husband. The refrigerator is empty. Michael nodded and continued to pretend to watch TV. And Kelly put on jeans, gave out a light glass jacket, and taking her purse from the shelf, left the apartment. Honestly, you have a grin written all over your face, Christopher muttered. Yes, I didn't do it myself, of course. You were interested, weren't you? What kind of scumbag are you? Kelly shook her head. But take it easy, he grimaced. You've forgotten what hole I pulled you out of. And for words like that, you might not get out of here. Unless they carry you out of here, under the cover of night. I don't care anymore. I got nothing to lose. You're probably right, Christopher nodded. But don't get your hopes up. It's so easy to get away with it. You're brave. Think about it. What good would your untimely death do me? Except to get my hands dirty. No, it's time to go to Plan B. All right. I'll help you complete your mission, and you can be free to go. What's the plan? I can't hear the enthusiasm in your voice. He scolded Kelly and laid out the plan. And not to waste time, tomorrow we will start my plan cheerfully, said Christopher. I dare not delay you any longer. Kelly sullenly took home and wondered if she should tell Michael. And then what would happen? Michael, of course, will hate me, probably want to divorce me. By the way, Christopher needs a divorce. Yeah, but I don't want to take away Michael's apartment and his business. And then it's his parents' apartment, not marital property. What the hell is a divorce? The young woman's thoughts bounced back and forth, but nothing came to mind. Kelly knew that Christopher had the means to juggle everything. So the apartment would end up being posted. And if she gave her notice already, she'd be in trouble. They'll just take her away to some woods and call it a day. Let it go, Kelly summed up. It was not in her position to make any sudden moves. Kelly went to the store and after buying bread, milk, potatoes, and chicken fillets, went up to the apartment. It was quiet there. Michael had fallen asleep in front of the television with the remote control in his hand. Poor little guy. With sympathy, she thought. Doesn't even know what's in store for him. For a second, she thought about telling Michael. Who knows, maybe the two of them could work something out. But the fear was stronger. Maybe it's not the right time. But what's wrong? Did you flinch? Asked the husband. No, no, nothing's wrong, Kelly reassured him. It's just that my godfather is coming to visit us. He was at our wedding, remember? Yeah, I remember, Michael sighed. But to be honest, I didn't really feel like having guests. I see, she sighed back. Well, I'll tell him what. It's fine, let him come over. He waved his husband's hand sluggishly. Really? No, if you do not mind. I understand everything. What's the big deal? Christopher showed up a couple days later with a large antelope suitcase. How long are you staying? Michael asked. We'll see, vaguely answered the guest, and Kelly thought better of herself. Think, you fool. She cut herself off. How do you feel about casinos? Asked Christopher. Never once visited this institution, he admitted. So this gap must be filled, cheerfully said the godfather of the wife. But to be honest, I have a prejudice against casinos. Come on, what's the reason? Just heard about people getting hooked on gambling. I'm too suggestible. There was a time when I had to learn to overcome the inability to say no and stand my ground. And as Christopher hummed, it worked. Michael smiled. Otherwise, Kelly and I wouldn't be married right now. What are you talking about? Imagine, to be honest, my parents were against our marriage at first, but I insisted. Well, then you're just gonna have to go to the casino, exclaimed the guest. As long as you're okay with it, there's no risk of you getting locked up. And then you just have to know where to go. So how about a casino? Why not? That night, Michael won a large sum of money and was euphoric. He treated everyone there to expensive champagne, then continued to play and won again. After that, Trinity went to one of the best restaurants in the city, and the next evening Michael offered to go to the casino again. This time, the wins were followed by losses, but in the end, Matthews left the gambling establishment not empty-handed. Well, guys, let's go play tonight, he asked over dinner. Maybe we shouldn't, Kelly said shyly. Of course we should, said Christopher. The excitement's still there. You gotta play. What a load of crap. After losing almost all his savings, Michael became desperate, and then he tried to pay off his debt and failed miserably. So the heir to the late owners of the country hotel became a regular at the casino. He was in and out of luck, and it got to the point that one day the casino owner wouldn't let him play. When you pay back what you owe, then we'll talk, he said. Mind they're a charitable organization. Kelly doomed herself by watching her lover. Yes, that's how a husband turns into an affair. But there was nothing she could do to help him. She could help herself. And when Christopher winked at Kelly and said, well, is it time? All she had to do was resign herself to fate. Michael has a theme, Christopher said. What's the subject? It's about your duty. Yes. Indifferently, he asked. Michael's brain was so foggy that he did not understand. Here he was the culprit of his current problems, and therefore he trusted Christopher unconditionally. Anyway, Michael, I want to buy your debt. I don't even have any money, and they won't let me play, sighed Matthews. Yeah, but you have a business and an apartment left over from your parents. I don't inherit until 6 months from now. Oh, come on, Christopher laughed. I'm on. What can I arrange? Everything. So you don't have to wait 6 months. Really? Really, he replied. You describe the business and the apartment to me, and you don't owe anyone or anything. But where am I going to live? Don't worry about that. We'll summarize your housing. Kelly, who was putting on a mask at the time, had a darkening in her eyes. Did it dawn on the young woman what kind of trap she had fallen into? What if it had been an apartment jointly acquired during the marriage? Kelly thought, but suddenly realized there would probably be no exchange. Christopher would have taken possession of the apartment anyway and set her and Michael adrift. And since that was the case, Michael shook her head. What am I hearing? Christopher said mockingly. His voice broke through. Why didn't you say something before? Silent about what? With suspicion, asked Michael. Michael, I can explain, Kelly exclaimed. I couldn't let you explain to me what's going on. The husband couldn't take it anymore. However, he was beginning to realize that everything from their marriage to Kelly to the appearance of Christopher was for a reason. Yeah, he got me hooked on the game on purpose. Michael gasped to himself. I still haven't learned how to say no, you idiot. Allow me a courteous tone, Christopher asked and began to tell. After hearing him, Matthews clutched his head. Michael, that's not quite true. Kelly flipped through it. He didn't tell you everything. I also love you. What a touching laugh from Christopher. I wondered what was missing from that story. But now that we're in the middle of it, I can in good conscience tell you to get out. And you, Mr. Matthews, I'll see a notary tomorrow. I'll draw you an address. And yes, I don't advise you to go to the police. You probably know that. But where should we go? Kelly asked. That's your problem, Christopher said. Michael, where are you going now? In a pitiful voice, Kelly asked. Anywhere. He cut him off. What about me? What does this have to do with us getting divorced? How did you want it? And Michael, but I love you. And I still don't understand you, of course. Where am I? Mommy and Daddy to my son, Michael said bitterly. And then it hit him. Those two were responsible for the death of his parents. All right, Kelly, let's split up. I'll call you later and we'll talk about the divorce. What do you say? The wife said quietly and walked away. Michael walked on and thought about where to stay. He sat down on a bench and took his cell phone out of his pocket and started calling his friends. Michael, I'd love to, but I'm flying to Sochi today. No, man, I'm sorry, but my parents are against it. Oh no, I'm with a girl. So you understand. He understood. He realized he had no friends as such. All the Matthews' few relatives lived in other cities. Michael didn't want to bother them. What a shame. Not only was his wife not who she said she was, but her godfather, who turned out to be a former roommate, had put him in debt. Michael wandered through the city and did not notice how he found himself on the outskirts of one of the most shabby neighborhoods. Meanwhile, Kelly was mourning her failed life. Christopher really didn't tell Michael everything, like the fact that Kelly, like himself, was also working off a debt. And then Christopher never coordinated his actions with her. Take the car accident that Ethan and Adriana got into. And Michael would probably blame me for their deaths. Desperate, the young woman thought. And he's right. If I hadn't come into his life, what good would it do to think about it? Kelly stood on the bridge and looked thoughtfully at the river. The current was very fast, and in some places there were whirlpools. It was dangerous to swim here. But it was easy to get out of life. The young woman resolutely put her foot over the railing. And what are you thinking? She heard a man's voice, and a second later, she felt someone grab her arm. Let me go, Kelly shouted. Who are you to take over my life? But the man in his 50s paid no attention to her cries. He put Kelly in an old Jegulonok, and only then spoke. Who am I? I'm a man who served in a hot spot, and I've seen people who desperately cling to even the tiniest chance of survival. Do you really think I'd let someone drive off a bridge like that? Kelly didn't answer. Her tears prevented her from speaking. But crying will make it easier, the man said, holding out a wet washcloth to Kelly. It won't. When the young woman gradually calmed down, the unexpected savior handed her a small bottle of mineral water and said, Well, tell me what happened to you. You know, I think you're going to be fine, said the man whose name was James. How old are you? Well, the fact that you have nowhere to go is fixable. Fixable. Kelly sighed. In what way? Let's go, the man said, starting the car and seeing the doubt in Kelly's eyes. He added, Don't worry. I don't hire people for specific assignments. Although from what point of view? Let's go and see for yourself. They drove up to a small hospital drowning in greenery, which was beginning to blossom. In the courtyard of the hospital stood a small and very beautiful church. So Kelly thinks you have a place to live and a job now. James smiled. You see, that outhouse over there is a lighthouse where you will live. What kind of job do you want to offer me? As the chief physician of this medical institution, I want to offer you the position of an orderly. It's important, he said. Thank you very much, Kelly smiled. I don't know how to thank you, but I'll thank you kindly, James, when I get the chance. In the meantime, go make arrangements. If you want to take a shower, go to the hospital building and see the hostess nurse. I'll let her know. So Kelly found herself some shelter and a job. She dutifully performed the duties of a nurse. She socialized with the staff and slowly forgot her old life. Now, for the first time in her life, Kelly could say that she was truly happy. And even if Kelly did not live in a 5-room apartment and did not visit beauty salons, but her conscience was clear. If there was anything that marred the young woman's life, it was the longing for Michael. It had been over a month since the Matthews soul hair had led a vagabond life, the day Christopher had driven Michael out of his own apartment. He had stumbled into the rather spacious basement of an abandoned house. To his amazement, there was a desk, but also an old armchair. Michael had some money left, so the problem with food was also solved. But he realized that one day his savings would run out and he would have to look for a job. At first, the new vagabond thought of settling in some hostel. But having imagined how he would present his passport in the name of Matthews Michael Ethanovich, he gave up this idea. Shame and shame. After all, the surname is known in the city. Besides, he was afraid that Christopher's men were looking for him. Sleeping in a chair all night, Michael got up somehow. His legs stiffened, and his 5th point was square. We should go to the dump. Maybe I can find some old blankets there, he thought. He didn't have to go far for blankets. As Michael walked out of the yard, he saw a dumpster with something gluey peeking out of it. It was definitely blankets, and he quickened his pace. To Michael's great joy, the blanket was not the only one. A comfortable recliner was assured. He thought happily and carried the blanket to his new dwelling. The main advantage of living on the outskirts of the city was that no one knew Michael. He worked part-time as a loader in 2 stores nearby. Sometimes he went to the dump, where he sometimes found quite decent household items. Occasionally, he found some nice dishes. But Michael was reluctant to pick them up. Who knows what the previous owner of the cups and spoons had been ill with? From time to time, Michael felt like a character in an adventure movie or a reality show and caught himself thinking that he liked this life. However, that didn't mean that Michael didn't want to return to normal life, and he vowed that he would do it. But Michael didn't know how. But he knew for sure that now he would avoid the casino a kilometer away. He would reinstate himself at the Institute and get back what was rightfully his. Sometimes Michael thought about Kelly, but he tried to keep thoughts of his wife, which she still was. When Michael called, she was unavailable. Well, I'll look into it. Later, he decided. After all, Kelly wasn't a needle. She'd find it. One day, on another trip to the dump, Matthews stumbled upon an old, shabby, but quite good-looking sofa made of substitute leather. Fortunately, the dump was not too far from the basement, so Michael had no problem transforming the sofa into his own. As the young vagrant breathed, the thought occurred to him that maybe there was some bedding inside the couch. But what Michael saw inside the couch nearly robbed him of his sanity. It was a suitcase full of large bills and rubles. Michael pulled out the money, and his hands trembled. He counted 100 wads, and when Matthews started counting them, he couldn't hold back a sigh of disappointment. They were dolls. Only the top and bottom 10 bills were real. After all, 2,000 isn't bad either, Michael thought. It'll be enough for a lawyer to help me deal with the inheritance. There must be something to do about this Christopher. Michael did not go to any notary at that time. I mean, it was clear he'd be dealt with later. And he did. Michael Matthews was bound to survive. A couple days later, there was a knock at the basement. Who could it be? Michael thought. He froze in fear and decided not to open the door. But the knocking became more and more insistent. Open the door, police. There was a stern male voice. This was the last thing I needed. On the doorstep stood 2 men who looked less like policemen than anything else in the world. One of them had a big swagger and gold teeth. A man, about 30 years old, dressed in a tracksuit. "Hello," Matthews replied confusedly. "Hey, bro. I think you took something that doesn't belong to you," said another type. Short, full, and also in a tracksuit. "Better, or rather, nicely. Took what?" Michael asked. "Come on," shouted the first one, and kicked him in the stomach and pushed him. A sharp pain pierced the whole body, and Michael lost consciousness. The last thing the son of the late Richman remembered. There was blood on his hand, which he involuntarily brought to his face. Ethan and Adriana smiled from their son and waved. And then the parents dissolved into the darkness and disappeared. "No," whispered Michael. "Mom, Dad, don't go." Waking up, he heard a painfully familiar female voice. "With such a serious wound," said a surprised male voice. "I thought he wouldn't make it." Michael slowly opened his eyes. Consciousness was still conceived on anesthesia, and he seriously thought that he had fallen into the next world. Where else would he meet his parents? Kelly whispered to Michael, "Did you die too?" "No," Michael replied with a smile, rubbing his forehead with a damp cloth. "I'm more alive than ever." "But you, if it wasn't for a random passerby that stabbed me, you don't remember." "I remember being stabbed in the stomach, and then I blacked out. I'm thirsty." "You can't have one yet." Kelly shook her head. "You can only look at your lips, and then you'll be examined by a doctor." "What are you doing here?" Michael whispered. "I work as an orderly," she replied. "But let's talk about that." "Then you can't talk much. I wouldn't survive if anything happened to you," the young woman added in her mind. When Michael was taken to the hospital, Kelly lost the floor in the hallway. "A bum was brought in again with a sigh," said the nurse Anya. "Whenever I'm on shift, it's always a bum. First of all, it's a person who needs our help. A knife wound is not a joke," said James, who was nearby. "So, honorable colleagues, sign it, and don't let me hear it again." "He's not such a bum," said Dr. Charles after examining the patient. "He has a passport." "So what's he like?" "Matthews Michael Ethanovich." Hearing this name, Kelly ran up to the new arrival. This overgrown bum is not her husband's age, which has already brought him to this state. "What if she's wrong?" "Can I see the passport?" Kelly asked. "Yes, please." Charles shrugged. "I know him slowly," she mouthed. "It's my husband." For 4 whole days, Michael remained unconscious. All this time, Kelly went to church and prayed for him. The young woman believed. They met for a reason. 2 days after Michael regained consciousness, he was feeling much better. Kelly had been by his side all those days. The end of April was almost summer hot. The couple sat in the hospital garden and sighed with pleasure at the enchanting scent of spring. "Michael, I really couldn't have warned you then," the young woman said one day about what was tormenting her. "I was doing my duty, like you." And then Christopher. Quietly, with a smile, her husband reassured her and stroked her cheek. "It's all right. Let's forget about it like a bad dream. It's just a pity about the money." "What money?" When he told Kelly about his find at the dump, she sighed and replied, "You know, Michael, I don't think you should regret that money. It wouldn't have made you happy. That kind of money can't make a man happy at all. It has to be earned. And only in this case money will provide a man with what he seeks: comfort, well-being, and everything else." "You're so smart, you know," he said admiringly, kissing Kelly on the temple. "You're right. It's just that this money could help us." "Help us with what?" "The only thing I care about right now is getting my apartment and my business back." "You know, Kelly, it wasn't until I hit rock bottom that I realized how important this is to me. I mean, this hotel is my parents' life's work and everything. And when I found that money, I thought it was a chance." "A chance?" Sadly, she grinned. "A chance to what?" "To give up my life." It was obvious that those dolls were put there on purpose. They just didn't think anyone would put that couch to shame. "We'll figure something out about getting the apartment and the business back." "What is there to think of?" Michael sighed. Do you have any idea how much a good lawyer costs? There'll be a day, there'll be food philosophically, Kelly remarked. Also true, Kelly. Yeah. Do you want us to be together? Aya. She smiled and whispered larger than life. Michael was making a steady recovery. Only where to go after the hospital. You can live with me in the outhouse, Kelly said. I don't think James would mind. It's not a 5-room suite, but it's still a roof over your head. Not a basement on the outskirts of town, he chuckled. And the couple laughed merrily. Kelly continued to work as a nurse, and Michael took a job as a handyman. Not the limit of dreams, but the young people believed that everything would be fine. But the Matthews couple were wrong. What awaited them next was simply wonderful. In the evening, when Michael was resting after work, Kelly was about to return from her shift. A policeman came to the outhouse, and William, the Matthews family lawyer. So this is where you're hiding, Michael Ethanovich. The lawyer said cheerfully, I've done something. He asked in surprise. You didn't. But Christopher, Aka. Igor is on a bender, said the policeman. He got caught in another scam. And the investigation came to the case of the death of your parents, as well as the case of your apartment. And then there's more. They found the perpetrator who set up your parents' car accident. In general, Michael Ethanovich, you have a real chance to get back your legal inheritance. The man smiled. And we can live in my parents' apartment. Not believing his happiness, Michael asked. William looked questioningly at the policeman, and he answered, At the moment your parents' apartment is sealed, but after the trial you can move in. So you'll have to stay here for a week. Hello. Kelly greeted the men as they entered. What's up? Everything is great, Michael exclaimed. The policeman, whose name was Liam, handed them their summonses, and the guests turned away. So what's the matter? Kelly asked. The point is that your godfather will get what he deserves, her husband proclaimed cheerfully and surrounded her across the room. Put me in my place, with courtly severity, said the young woman. You are not allowed yet. Better tell me the details. Yes, with pleasure. The trial went off without a hitch. The swindler got 8 years, and then the Matthews couple, thanked James profusely, moved into Michael's parents' apartment. Nothing's changed, he commented, but we should check to make sure that the spirit of this Christopher is not here. Kelly grimaced, and seeing his silver lighter on the table, ostentatiously tossed it into the trash. After all the trials that fell to their share spouses, Matthews decided to get married. The sacrament of marriage took place a month after the triumphant return to the apartment. Which church should we choose? Michael asked his wife. I think the answer is obvious. Kelly smiled. The one at the hospital. The whole hospital staff was invited to the wedding, admiring the beautiful couple and genuinely happy that their hardships were behind them. Maybe we could go to a restaurant, Michael suggested. I would love to, but work is not waiting. James replied with sincere regret. Is it true? Said, we're short-staffed, so we're working weekends. So the guys will notice another time, smiled Matthews. Then we invite everyone to the new year. But we still have to live till the new year, grinned the head doctor. But thank you for the invitation. On the way home, the couple bought a bottle of wine and ordered dinner at a restaurant. Michael and Kelly sat on the loggia and with tenderness, looking at each other, savoring Serbian pomegranate wine. I look at the stars and remember my parents, Michael confessed to his wife. And I, too, with a sigh responded to the death of my parents cannot be called worthy. But they did not stop being my parents. Back at the hospital, Kelly told him about her real parents, and it brought them even closer together. It couldn't be otherwise. There were no secrets between them now. I think that both my parents and your parents are looking down on us from heaven and rejoicing, Michael said, taking her hand in his. Kelly looked at her husband with gratitude, and tears and happiness glistened in her eyes. Michael entered into the rights of inheritance. He was reinstated in the institute and now combined his studies and work. In addition to an apartment and a country hotel, parents left the young a substantial sum of money, and the need to work in the hospital was no longer necessary. The couple often visited James and the other employees, who were always happy to see them. Kelly was also planning to reinstate herself at the Institute, but it looked like that would have to wait. An incomplete course, the dean said, so I can't help you. The young woman was upset, but after a few days she learned that there was nothing to grieve about. We are going to have a child, said Kelly Michael, who at that time was sitting at the lecture. Olenka, it's true, shouted he absent-mindedly, forgetting where he was. The professor looked disapprovingly at the Matthews student, and Michael smiled disarmingly. I'm sorry, Matvey Semyonovich, he said. It's just that I just found out that I'm going to be a father. Well, congratulations, smiled involuntarily back at the professor. But please keep your voice down. All right, Michael assured him. Everything that had happened to him had completely changed his life. From that moment, Michael felt really grown up and strong. Long ago, his grandmother used to say that all trials are given to a person for something. Michael didn't understand it at that time because of his young age. But now he's a 20-year-old man who does. He and Kelly had to go through what they went through. Otherwise, they wouldn't have realized they needed each other. No, with an obscenely happy smile, Michael was thinking, barely catching on to what the professor was saying. We don't just need each other. We're made for each other. The story of their acquaintance could not be called romantic, and what happened next was more like a fairy tale. So what? At least they're doing great now. After all, they say the harder it rains, the brighter the sun will shine. 8 months from now, a bundle of helium and pink-colored balloons soared into the sky, and people standing in the courtyard of the maternity hospital shouted hooray for good luck. May he grow up healthy. Michael held his newborn daughter in his arms and felt like the king of the world. But Kelly, holding a giant bouquet of roses, smiled and felt like the happiest and most beloved woman in the world. Come and see us again, the midwife said with a smile. The woman, who had delivered more than 100 babies, spoke the usual memorized words. But those words seemed to be addressed exclusively to them. We will, the young father declared. And we will do it more than once. Really, my favorite, of course, smiled Kelly. And the employee of the maternity hospital, in turn, thought that these two really visit here and more than once. Camille began to twist her head in front of the mirror, trying to see her hairstyle. The hairdresser almost pulled an extra strand of hair away from her and told her not to do it again. So threateningly she said, "Sit up straight, or you'll end up bald. Miranda, I need to see what's going on. When I'm done, you can look at it then." Miranda was Camille's own sister, so she treated her like that. There were rarely any misunderstandings between them, and all disputes were settled by compromise. However, as big sister, the difference was 3 years. Miranda sometimes had a commanding manner, and she seemed to like it a lot. "And if I don't like it," Camille pleaded. "It's all right, we'll fix it," Miranda replied with humor. "This is the 3rd time you've come to see me this month. Are you not satisfied with your own appearance? I can't decide on an image, honestly. As soon as I plunged into business, I want everything at once. And there are so many worries that I can barely keep up." "Oh, come on. Don't be so smug. It's only a small cafe, and there's not enough customers to get tired. If you can't keep up, ask your son and daughter-in-law to help you." "You're wrong about the customers. Some days there are no vacancies," Camille corrected her. "As for William and his fiancée, I'd rather invite strangers. My son didn't take my advice. Now he'll have to make his own way." "You shouldn't do that, sister. He won't forgive you." I shook my head. "Miranda, mark my word, you'll have to ask him for help. Only it won't be too late. I can handle it myself." With a frown furrowing her brow, Camille replied, "And get your hair done." "I have to get back to the cafe," Miranda continued, her sister. But at the same time, she was slightly offended by her attitude towards her own son. William was considered the most promising assistant in the business. He had a degree in economics, but at the moment he was investing his knowledge in the development of another firm, and he could have worked at his mother's cafe to make it even more profitable. But no, Camille didn't want to see her sister-in-law Lisa as a rival, especially since they had different characters and views on life. Not only that, her sister-in-law initially seemed to her a wiretapped and uneducated girl. She had a wrong opinion that they were not a couple and that they were different. Camille had too high an opinion of herself. Despite the fact that she had nothing to do with powerful people, the cafe didn't give her any preferential treatment, but she told everyone she knew that she ran a serious business. Of course, they tried not to argue with her and just nodded their heads. But behind her back, they would say things that would make your hair stand on end. It is possible that Camille knew about it, but did not pay attention. She believed that all means are good for achieving the goals, and if necessary, it is possible to go over the heads. Well, now it was all set. Miranda finished and showed the result of her work. What's not bad? I would even say stylish. Camille replied with a bow of her lips, satisfied. I tried. So you owe me a bonus. All right, I'll tip you. Well, thank you, and you're welcome. What was that about? Your hair on your head. You mean your hair? Miranda waved her hand. Oh, I see. Humor in all its glory. Camille nodded. Then hold on, the Joker deserves it. She opened her purse and took out a $3,000 bill and handed it to Miranda. You took it carefully and tucked it into your apron pocket. Thank you for such a generous tip. Oh, come on. It's not like we're strangers, and I have something to pay with, especially since you got your hair done. I just made myself look like a real businesswoman. And now no one can say you're just a housewife. They're right to a certain extent, Camille shrugged. I spend most of my time at home in cafes and come back every other day, and then only for important issues and business meetings. But that's not the point. The main thing is that you like it. And think about your son. He's just starting his family life. He needs your support. We'll see. I can't promise anything. But by the way, I've done everything on my own, and nobody gave me anything for free. I had to literally grind my teeth to find my own piece of happiness. Did you do the same with the cafe? Miranda asked slyly. I don't know what you mean. Camille shook her head. She pretended that she didn't get the meaning of the question. And about the money you used to open it. And it's not just a gift of fate, but a serious investment. Except if it doesn't work out, you know what's gonna happen. Everything will be fine. I'm sure of it. And there's no need to jump to conclusions. My cafe is just gaining momentum, and soon you'll see a real surge in traffic. People will be coming in from all over the neighborhood. Well then, I wish you success. Miranda hugged her sister and on full automatic fixed her hair. The bee had gotten a little confused. I'm sorry I got a little emotional with you. It's okay, I'm used to it. Camille waved her hand. You've always been big and fit, not like I'm skinny and short. You took after your mom and I took after my dad. And that's something to be proud of. You're right. They gave us a life and helped us make up our minds. Thanks again for the haircut. I'll stop by if I have time. Okay, maybe Saturday. Miranda sighed and shook her head as she looked at her sister. Apparently, she didn't like Camille's attitude toward life's priorities, and above all, her negative reaction to her own son, who had done nothing wrong, except that he had gotten together with a girl without listening to her advice. However, William was 25 years old, and he had every right to control his own destiny. After he started living with Lisa, he never asked her for money, all because he did not want to humiliate himself, knowing his mother's temper. Besides, he didn't want to look like a worthless man in her eyes. But what's interesting is that Lisa didn't reproach him for their humble existence. She herself worked at the market, traded things, and also earned in the general family budget. However, William was not in a hurry, and with the registration of relations, agreeing to a civil marriage. Between them, initially formed trust and mutual understanding, and Lisa calmly treated that as something William said "We will have to live like this for 6 months or a year to save up for the wedding." And then he also made it clear that he would not go to his mother to beg for money. It's not to say he was proud. It's just that there was a precedent when he had to overstep his own principles. This incident happened right after graduation. William urgently needed money, and there were no other options but his mother at that moment. But after her answer, he lost the desire to turn to her for help for the rest of his life. She unashamedly said, "Son, you are an adult now, so solve your own problems and don't come to me for a handout." It sounded rude and hurtful. William didn't expect such a response. It was like he'd been hit with ice water. It turned out that he did not turn to his mother for help, but came to beg. And this is despite the fact that at that time she did not yet have a cafe, and she worked as an ordinary accountant at the factory. However, already at that time, Camille began to think of herself as a high-flying man, and did not pay attention to what they thought relatives and acquaintances. She had no remorse for her mistakes and missteps. On the contrary, she put them in the rank of gaining invaluable experience, and braved the fact that everything has its time, and soon everything will change for the better. But it took time, and years, for the business to become a lifelong endeavor. It is likely that Camille was aware of this, but did not accept it as a settled reality, and moved forward according to some specific plan of her own. At the same time, the problems that came her way made her more and more nervous, and made her look back. And Camille began to notice that it was not so easy to manage the business. However, she could not admit it to her closest circle, and above all to her own sister, because Miranda was on good terms with William. On the one hand, it was a vicious circle, which she created herself. On the other hand, there was an opportunity to get out of the trap. The second option promised prospects for development and growth. But for that, she had to agree to Miranda's proposal. Her sister had hinted that William could use her help. What she didn't say was how best to do it. Given the way things were between Camille and her son, it was hard to imagine them reconciling. Besides, he didn't live alone, and that meant that she would have to take her daughter-in-law on bail and share the family life with her, despite their differences and divergences. Camille could not yet decide on this step, because in this case would have to come down from heaven and do what her son did when he asked her for money to overstep his own principles. After weighing the pros and cons, she came to the conclusion that she could do without his help. She even said out loud, "It doesn't hurt to need someone else's handouts." And this meant that she categorically denied any interference in her business, did not want to share it with anyone, much less show the real state of affairs. And if her son found out, he would have a reason to ridicule her, and in her opinion, the rest of the chain would get the information. In general, Camille was so intimidated by herself that she didn't even want to hear about any help. She was constantly seeing the snide faces of her relatives, and she was not going to let them pounce on her like a pack of hungry hyenas. She was pulling her weight with all her might, refusing to accept the harsh reality. When Camille arrived home, the first thing she did was to take a shower and wash off the rest of the day, except for the hair salon. She also visited the cafe and solved some organizational issues. The manager showed the reports for the week, and in general they were more or less optimistic, not to say that the place was making a fabulous profit, but so far it seemed to be able to stay afloat. I prepared a light dinner. Camille turned on, relaxing her music, and sat down massage chair. It was set to the right program, and after a few minutes, she felt an inexpressible sensation. Euphoria. Such an impression as if she was in the tender hands of a real masseur, and he carefully, with extreme precision, relieved the tension all over her body. This attitude to relaxation suggests that Camille loved herself more than anyone else. At the same time, selfishness partly offset by a cordiality to those who were on good terms with her, well, or didn't try to put sticks in her wheels, and generally showed proper respect, even if one wanted to make remarks. Criticism hurt her ego, and Camille could lose her temper, regardless of personalities. True, quickly calmed down, realizing that this is not the way out. To some extent, she retained her common sense, and she did not allow herself too sharp steps. Restraint in her emotions sometimes saved her from the most disastrous consequences. What happened the next day, however, unleashed a wave of indescribable anger. Waking up at 10 o'clock, Camille planned to go out of town to her best friend. Miranda Long invited her, but they still could not meet. Now she had the opportunity to visit and talk about buying a plot of land. In her mind, she wanted to build a cottage and grow flowers there, so that she could invite her friends and acquaintances and brag about the blooming garden. But the trip had to be canceled because of an urgent call from the manager. Stephen was gasping for air as he spoke into the phone. "Camille, this is just nonsense. We didn't realize it ourselves. He came in and gave us a hard time, and he said we were gonna be in big trouble. Yeah, like they explained what happened in the exam." She gave the manager a hard time. "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm worried and anxious. The thing is, we got a visit from the SS, and they found some irregularities. If we don't fix them by tomorrow, they'll close the cafe." "What did you find?" "Stephen, open alcohol in the kitchen, ventilation problems, poor service in the lounge, and a few not washing their plates." The manager replied with a tremor in his voice, "But Emily and the waiters have nothing to do with it. They do their job properly. I have no complaints about them." Camille muttered angrily, "But Rick will have to be dealt with severely. I've seen him leave bottles open by the stove. I wouldn't be surprised if he's drinking them too. So what do we do now? We've got to get this fixed by tomorrow, or we'll have to close the cafe. And I'll figure something out. In the meantime, you clean up where I'm not needed, and don't let anyone slack off, or I won't see you, my staff, and I'll hire another team. All I have to do is snap my fingers. Yeah, I got it. You got it." The manager's voice was shaking, and it spoke of how he had become in the face of her threats. At the same time, the confusion from the first minutes of the conversation suggested to Camille that he was barely coping with the duties assigned to him, and he was bound to fail at some point. But what to do? She didn't know yet. However, certain thoughts were in her head, and the main one was to invite her son to help her. But before doing so, Camille intended to solve the problems herself and not to waste time. She called the inspectorate. The director of the organization answered and hinted at money. All that remained was to collect the necessary amount of money, hand it over to the right person, and that was the end of it. However, this option did not suit her, and all because she was afraid of the continuation of extortion. In other words, she would have to give a hand now, and then she would have to pay back all the time. But time was running out, and no one was going to forgive them for their violations. Not only that, but more serious problems could arise. Camille had already imagined what it would be, but there was nowhere to go, and she began to look in her notebook for her son's phone number. There hadn't been any calls lately, so it wasn't saved in the outgoing calls. But tears came to her eyes when she saw the signature, Sanulia. No matter what you say, but her heart felt her own daughter. And no matter what was going on between them at the moment, there was still a response, holding a pause, as if it was the riskiest move for her. Camille dialed William's number. 3 beeps sounded before he answered. "Hello, I'm listening." "Hello, son. How are you doing?" "Hi, Mom. I'm fine. And if you mean I'm not starving and going around the world with my hand out, you don't have to worry, do you? We have everything we need to live." "I wasn't going to talk about that," Camille replied, and with barely restrained emotion, "I just wanted to know how you were doing. I don't need much, just a piece of your voice." "You heard my answer," William said unhappily. "Something else? Or can we stop talking?" "Wait, I have something to tell you. Just don't interrupt and take it seriously. I don't want you to feel like your mother was a helpless person. Are you in some kind of trouble? That's where you should have started. And don't think about how I'm gonna react, despite our differences. You're my mother, and nothing's changed lately." "That's good to hear, son," Camille replied, almost crying. "I thought you'd forgotten we were related." "No, Mom. But unlike you, I didn't put up barriers. And if you've called to ask for something, You can count on me. The thing is, William, my cafe needs a competent manager, and I'd like you to take the job. But if memory serves, you have a Stephen there. And he seems to be doing okay. Exactly. It's like a problem shows up when you weren't expecting it. She interrupted her son. Sometimes I think the staff create them on purpose. I don't think so. Although I don't rule out that some of them are negligent in their duties. That's not surprising. It's not like you're there that often. Well, they're feeling the pinch. I knew you'd say that. I never doubted your insight. So, what are you gonna do? Take over? I don't know. It's kind of sudden. Especially since I have a job. Stephen hesitated. I need to think about it. Besides, you know I'm not the only one who makes decisions. Yeah, well, Lisa has a say in your family too. And you can't quit your job. Camille replied with a heavy sigh. But on the other hand, one head is better than two. You can combine them for now. And at the same time to think up such a plan of action that all enemies and competitors would be jealous. We don't need enemies, of course, but we can compete with our rivals. Besides, healthy excitement only inspires great achievements and gives confidence that you are on the right path. And I can take that as a yes. I think it is. But I'm not quitting just yet. So I'm sorry, son. The problems need to be solved today. And first and foremost, discipline. You said yourself that they're sensing weakness. You should have noticed it yourself. You own the cafe. Let's not talk about that now, Camille said irritably. This is about your professional qualities, and it's important to me that you clean up the cafe. All right, it's a deal. I'll be there in an hour. Having finished talking to him, she put the phone away on the nightstand and made a thoughtful face in her head. Immediately there was a fleeting thought, and was it right that I called my son to help? He would think that I had failed. My inner gut began to tell me that I should act, relying on my own strength. But the mother's heart was drawn to the native blood of the kidney, and having made certain conclusions, Camille still chose the second option. With William, it would be possible to turn mountains. If she had done it earlier, then she would not have faced the problems that fell like from the horn of plenty. At the same time, Camille gained invaluable experience, and at certain moments it helped her a lot. She had even gotten away with it when there seemed to be no chance of escape. But now there were insurmountable difficulties, primarily because he had lost control over his subordinates, and they were increasingly working overtime. But she had no good reason to fire any of them. Or rather, she didn't have the courage to say goodbye. Camille decided to entrust this mission to her son to ward off the storm clouds. Again, it was not without mercantile interests, although, if one judged it that way, she depended on him too. At the moment, the son was the only free salvation, and it's a good thing he agreed. He could have remembered all her antics. Camille, as imagined their meeting after a painful parting, and then a little bit even shivers ran down his spine, as if cold from somewhere it was pulled. Dialing the CES director's number again, she proudly told him, "We will fix everything. You'll see it tomorrow." Good. Cell phone rings. Glad to hear it. But if anything, the cafe will have to close. The man replied sneeringly, "Don't even think about it. I won't give you that opportunity." Camille felt relieved that she had partially solved her problems. All she had to do was wait for her son, who promised to correct her mistakes. He did not reproach her for taking on an impossible burden, but at the same time he made his position clear and made it clear that it was better to work together. She did not even argue with this, because she had experienced all the vicissitudes and intricacies of business, and if at first everything seemed to be a simple hobby, it soon turned into a heavy routine, and it required more and more dedication from her. And Camille couldn't get the last juices out of herself. And as a result, both the management system and the quality of service suffered. The SES representative quickly discovered this and demanded that it be fixed, but left a window of opportunity for a financial settlement, and it was up to her to take advantage of it. For now, Camille opted for her son's help in the hope that he would spare her the unnecessary expense. An hour later, As promised, William arrived, but not alone. Lisa arrived with him. She looked around fearfully, as if she were afraid of meeting monsters. In fact, she had a state of surprise. After all, it had been so long since Camille had invited them over to her place, playing the part of the cheap and grand business lady. And now this event, of course, it couldn't help but come as a shock. Well, here we are. Mom, right from the doorstep, said William, and put his arm around her shoulders. As you can see, I'm not offended by you, and we can discuss everything in peace. Thank you, son. I didn't expect to hear any other words from you. She nodded back at him. Hello, Camille. Lisa greeted her quietly. Hello, sister-in-law. Why are you so weak? I didn't eat enough porridge this morning. No, I just had some. Oh, you probably weren't planning on coming to see me. But to be honest, I wasn't, because you haven't called us in a while. Mom, you called me looking for a reason to fight. William frowned. No, son, not even a thought. I shook my head. I was just checking just in case you really did have other plans, and you had to change them because of me. That's okay. We'll do it some other time, especially since your problems are more important. And I wanted to get straight to the point so I could get them done by tomorrow. Maybe I'll have tea and cake then, Camille suggested. I'd like that. I like desserts. What about you? Lisa? I'd love to. I like cake. Well, that's fine. Come on then, sister-in-law. Help me set the table. What am I supposed to do? William looked at them in surprise. Oh, I almost forgot. Here's Stephen's number. Call him and clear up the situation. Anyway, plug in. Time's running out. I do not want to blush tomorrow in front of the SES. Besides, I told them, or rather, the director, that we'll fix it. I'll see what I can do. His mother and Lisa went to the kitchen, and he started calling Stephen. He answered only after the second ring and didn't immediately realize who was bothering him. Sorry, I didn't recognize William. How long will you live? Thank you. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how to fix all the problems. After all, they didn't arise on a single day, and it's obvious that the staff has been unraveling the situation for a long time. And you didn't follow up on it properly. But you know I'm gonna talk about this right now, so get pen and paper ready. Meanwhile, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law were busy preparing for the tea party. Besides the cake, which was cut into small pieces, they decided to make sandwiches on the table, and immediately smoked sausage appeared, followed by cheese, tomatoes, cucumbers, and salad leaves. And it was all topped off with a prefabricated arrangement of waffles and candy in the crystal vase. What William was talking to Stephen about. They weren't even listening. They didn't seem at all interested in how events were unfolding there, and one could assume that all their attention was focused on their own communication. In other words, Camille and Bulega were trying to establish contact, and they succeeded quite well because they did everything smoothly and without disagreements. In any case, no one teased or rushed them. Camille even complimented Lisa on the quality of the slicing. She liked the way her sister-in-law put the cheese and sausage on the plates, and also noted the interesting combination of sandwich layers. Overall, the meeting was a success after a long standoff. Although, to be honest, Camille was worried that they would not find common ground and fight in the first minute. But that didn't happen, and the storm clouds had bypassed them. Looking at the treat, she smiled contentedly and said, I definitely like our tandem. What do you think? I think so too. I agree, Lisa nodded. All the more so because you were kind to me and didn't throw me out on my doorstep. Well, how could I do that? Camille shrugged. Invite you in and then walk out the door. No, I've never stooped so low as to go to all that trouble. What happened with the cafe? It's just little things, but they need to be dealt with. I hope William can do that so I don't have to close the place down. Even so. But why? It was obvious that Lisa did not ask questions out of idle curiosity. She was really worried about the fate of the cafe. even though she had nothing to do with it. The trouble is that I've gotten too caught up in my image. Camille replied sadly with a heavy sigh. I visited beauty salons, fashion boutiques, but I forgot about the main thing. Cafe requires attention, like any other business. And if you let everything go, then you can say goodbye to wives and money. You're right, you need control everywhere. It's hard to imagine stability without it. I trade things at the market, and it seems to be nothing complicated. But if I get distracted, I lose part of the profit or goods. I heard William's voice, and that's where the conversation had to stop. Anyway, he and I solved the main problems, but I still have to go there now. I want to make sure that my words have reached their intended recipients, and if you'll let me, I'll assign individual tasks to the staff. Well done. You can see that there is a commercial spirit, she praised her son. And who do you plan to punish? Well, to think with their heads and work on their conscience. I don't know yet. I'll come and with Stephen we'll decide what to do, shrugged William. By the way, what should I tell him about his current position? You're the manager now. And if you think he'll be useful, keep him as an assistant. I will. That's exactly what I was gonna ask you. The kid's not bad. From the way we talked to him just now, he answered clearly. He was nervous, though. But it's no big deal. And as for those who caused the trouble, I'll find a way to talk some sense into them without negative consequences. Everything is in your hands. Go ahead, Camille nodded. You have broad authority. Think of it as acting on my behalf. It's a deal. Then I'll go right away. What about the cake and sandwiches? Lisa asked in surprise. I'll come back and eat. If you leave some for me, William smiled and kissed her on the cheek. And Mother? Yes, I almost forgot. You can go now. Lisa and I will take care of her. Looking at his watch, William furrowed his brow. What were you thinking about for a minute? Then waved his hand at them and left the apartment. At that moment, he had only one thought to solve his mother's problems and get home as soon as possible. Though she didn't persecute, he still felt out of place, burdensome and onerous. It seemed to him an invitation, all the more so at the most unexpected moment. William couldn't believe his mother was doing all this unselfishly, well or heartily wishing to make up with him. He knew her character perfectly well, and more than once was convinced that it could not be corrected. His mother would rather make strangers relatives than condescend to him. And this was no exaggeration, for she had never been able to admit her own mistakes. As soon as she had a problem, she immediately turned to her son for help, but not even a word about the fact that she acted very meanly towards him and his fiancée. It was not in her speeches, only restrained emotion and pleas for help. You see, business was starting to fall apart, and something had to be done. William agreed to help without any preconditions. He only hinted that he would solve her problems in his own way. Otherwise, as far as personal relationships were concerned, he remained modestly silent. And that only earned him points with his mother. In fact, he did not say sorry, but you spit in my soul, and I will not save you. No such words came out of his mouth. On the contrary, William felt her distress and came without delay to take the situation into his own hands. But he brought Lisa as a symbol of the family relationship. It was necessary to let the mother realize that they are with her as a whole, love each other, and are not going to part. In addition, the wedding was in the plans as a finishing touch, as well as the beginning of a new path in their lives. And naturally, it would not do without children. In any case, their birth William did not reject, only suggested Lisa, first to get a little stronger and on her feet. It was necessary to prepare carefully for the replenishment, so as not to meet him with empty pockets. After he left for the cafe, Camille, in her right as hostess, placed the tea into mugs and set out a stick of cream. It smells so good. It's like it just came from the plantation. I always buy only the highest grade, and in a familiar tea shop, she boasted to her daughter-in-law. We don't drink the expensive kind, but it's good too. Lisa shrugged. That's okay. You've got it all ahead of you, and I didn't come to it right away either. On the other hand, it's all about brains. If they work properly, you can achieve a lot. Not everybody can do what you do, even with a bright head. I think it's important to have support in the beginning. And if you don't have that, it's hard to make your way in life on your own. Nonsense. And I did. And you and William will do great. But you're gonna have to work on yourself. What do you mean? Lisa's eyebrows furrowed, sensing a catch. Yeah, relax. I just wanted to tell you not to stand in one place, she clarified. Her argument. You need to develop, to gain knowledge. A new profession, finally. Well, I'm not sitting at home working. That's understandable. But the market is not the end of the world. You're not going to spend your life selling things. I guess not. But I haven't thought about it yet. Lisa shrugged. You should. Otherwise, you'll regret the opportunities you missed. Taking a sip from her mug, she added. And the best thing is to change your line of work. I don't have a college degree, so a job in a prestigious company is out of the question. Why are you so down in the dumps? You can start small, like waitressing. Are you by any chance referring to your cafe? Lisa asked with a smile. To be honest, yes, especially since William has already agreed. Now he's just getting up to speed and becoming a full-fledged manager. I want to expand, and with the state of affairs as they are at the moment, it's hard to dream of anything. Maybe I can do it, but it takes practice. I've never worked in the service industry. There's a first time for everything, even when we're first born. Don't think that I'm offering you a waitress job on purpose, and you'll think that your mother-in-law is sending you to the bottom. You didn't start out on the top either, Lisa reminded her. So why should I take offense to that? Every job is honored. It doesn't matter what you're doing at the moment. If you're honest and conscientious, there's no talking. Just respect and gratitude for that you don't have to worry about. I don't hurt anyone with money, Camille smiled. All my employees are paid on time and none of them has ever complained. I'll have to have a word with William. I think he'll be pleased to know that his wife has decided to work with him. So you're saying he's definitely going to be the manager? I'm pretty sure of it. Camille declared proudly. There's not much money to be made at the firm where he works now. And I have the opportunity to move up. Where else? Lisa was surprised. For example, as a cafe director or even owner. Time will tell. It all depends on him. Will you be without your business? No, everything will stay with me. I'll just open a new outlet and manage it there. Because I've agreed to do it as a combination for now. Stephen will stay on as an assistant. See if we can get the cafe out of the doldrums. You have such grandiose plans. It's heartwarming. Lisa smiled, and her eyes sparkled. So I didn't invite you here for nothing. The result is obvious. Camille nodded, and they even clapped their hands. William won't be able to quit right away because he has to test his own strength. But you can start waitressing tomorrow. Thank you, Camille. That's so kind of you. I'm speechless. How can I express my gratitude? Do a good job, and that will be enough. Oh, and love my son without cheating or lying. I wasn't going to do that. With a kind of resentment in her voice, Lisa replied and pouted her lips. Well, don't be offended. I didn't say it out of spite. Camille ran her hand over her head like a mother. But it's important to me, too, that William be in good hands, and not to know grief, as families do when trust fails. And in its place comes meanness and betrayal. Yes, I hear you. You can rest assured of my honesty. I always work, and have always worked with complete dedication. There you go. I haven't even hired her as a waitress at my cafe yet, and I've already humiliated her, and did not even blink an eye, but pretended as if nothing had happened. It is possible that her employees did the same to her, because she did not put them in anything, but decided not to talk about it yet. It was only in a private conversation with Stephen that her son found out, and frankly, he was shocked. True, he did not abandon the case halfway through and brought it to its logical conclusion. In fact, he saved the cafe from closure, and the mother helped to save her reputation. After all, about her could go bad word of mouth, and then the customers would have stopped coming. That seemed to be Camille's greatest fear, not that she had offended her sister-in-law again. It didn't make her feel unbalanced or even compelled to apologize, as she should have done, especially since she knew how the relationship between Lisa and her son had developed. William almost carried his wife in his arms, blew dust from her, and made her happy with his successes at work. Together, they were willing to go to great lengths to achieve their happiness. "Let's eat another piece and leave these for William," Camille suggested, looking enigmatically at the cake. "I second that," nodded Lisa. And while they were enjoying the dessert, William was giving a lecture to the staff, but not threatening them with dismissal, but asking them to get smart. "Yeah, you gotta realize you can't relax. You're gonna be looking for a new job later. So we should just put in our applications right now." They all asked him. "No, you don't have to do that yet." He shook his head. "But if you don't get smart, my mother will throw you out on the street and not care that some people have families and financial problems." "We understand, William, and we'll try to live up to that trust." "Good. Especially since Stephen is staying with you." "Yes, he'll be my assistant, but other than that, he'll have the same responsibilities. And believe me, I'm not going to humiliate any of you. We will resolve all issues through compromise," Stephen added. "And no problem will go unaddressed." "Yes, that's right. And now we need to close the cafe for preventive maintenance and put it in order. Tomorrow, representatives of the Sanitary and Epidemiological Service will come to inspect the place. We must make sure that they did not find a single comment or violation. We'll do our best. Maybe you can rely on us." Again, the staff replied in unison and began to put things in order. "You see." And no one had to be punished. William looked at Stephen and patted him on the shoulder. "How will you explain Camille to your mother?" "I'll say that I solved everything peacefully and without firing anyone. I'm not in favor of radical methods. Although I will not hide that when I was going, I wanted to make a mess. But then I came, assessed the situation, listened, and came to the conclusion that my mother is not a gift either. On the one hand, yes, but Stephen hesitated, trying to find the right words. But she's the owner of the cafe, and that says it all." William interrupted him, and at the same time logically completed the phrase. "That's what I meant. And you will be combining, as I understand it." "Yes, that's right. And then we'll see. I'm in no hurry. No one's pushing me around at my day job, and the management respects me, so I don't see the point in changing anything yet. Isn't that like the horse in the crosshairs thing?" Stephen said and smiled embarrassedly, something like that. "Now go command the team and deal with the ventilation today. The repair crew will be here soon. I've already put in a requisition. I'll be expecting them any minute. And don't forget about the alcohol. Don't let that guy touch it again. What if you do? The first time lying down, he won't understand. They'll kick you out. We don't want any trouble. What if he gets drunk in the middle of the day and shows up like that in front of the guests? There will be a scandal." And with a blow to the reputation of the cafe, nodded Stephen, and even a little sweat, imagining such a picture. "I'll be sure to keep an eye on him to make sure he doesn't do anything wrong." "That's good. Keep up the good work. I've got to go. Goodbye, William. And thanks for your kindness. Come on, we'll make it up to you. Today I helped you. Tomorrow you'll do me a favor." William was kind to Stephen, and Stephen was pleased. He didn't have to pack up and leave the cafe. In addition, nothing out of the ordinary happened, although the son of the landlady wanted to publicly punish someone. But it didn't happen, because Lisa kept him from taking rash steps. She understood more than anyone else what respect and honesty were. And if she heard negative things about herself, it didn't mean that she had to mirror them. Lisa did not allow herself to use profanity because she considered it a sign of ignorance and tried to keep her emotions in check, even if she wanted to take them out on someone. She would endure the inner pain and simply walk away in silence. William knew this and was careful to say every word. That was the basis of their family relationship. Coming home from the cafe back to his mother's house, he had no idea what she would tell them. Even more surprising was that Lisa had been supportive, even though it had never been idyllic between them before. And with his new worries, it was a serious test for his nervous system. At the same time, he did not risk dissuading his wife from her decision. "I'm shocked, to be honest. I didn't expect it," William said. After Lisa announced the offer of a waitressing job. "Why not? Better than standing in the market," Camille shrugged. "Besides, they pay tips, and not bad ones at that. Sometimes, and not a day's wages exceeds." "All right, let them try. If they don't like it, they'll leave. I talked to the team and realized that they cannot work normally." "Wow, I thought it was the other way around." "No, Mom, it's fine. It's just that they got a little slack and decided to do me a favor and leave me without a cafe." She snidely continued the line for him. "No, you're just imagining things." William reassured her. "You'll see that after a while everything will change and the cafe will be transformed for the better. Its name will rumble all over the neighborhood and attract crowds of customers. I'd like to believe that, especially since I don't plan to close. I need a new location to keep growing." "Yes, William." Lisa nodded. "Your mom wants you to take over the cafe in the future and run the new place herself. It's like the plan of the century. I can't add or subtract." "Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll see what happens. But for the near future representatives of the SES or any other inspection organizations, we'll definitely not bother your cafe. Consider it already yours." "I decided so." Camille moved to him a plate with a piece of cake. "A treat. Lisa and I have had enough. And there are sandwiches left if you want some. You can eat at my place. You won't have to cook anything." "Thank you. I really did work up an appetite." William enjoyed the cake, but he looked at his wife and mother. Her bad character and the situation didn't add up. It was too sugary. Everything looked as if a thick layer of honey had been smeared on, but there was still tar underneath. And if it was not removed and checked at once, then at the very end one could come across bitterness and humiliation. Thinking about it, William decided not to jump to conclusions. It was one thing for his wife to want to work in the cafe, but it was another thing for her mother to treat her the same way. After all, judging by what he had heard from the staff, he could expect anything from her. And that was worrying, because she hadn't worried about her daughter-in-law's future before. And this is so generous. It's like a free cheese in a mousetrap. But no trap. I had to wonder where the catch was, where to look for it, so as not to be in a stupid position. William didn't know the answers to these questions yet, but he took note of them to keep the situation under control. He didn't want to be left in the lurch and lose his wife. Lisa was an impressionable person, and sometimes she took events to heart. William, of course, tried to explain that it was not necessary to let everything pass through him, but he realized that everyone's state of mind was different, and it was impossible to predict in advance this or that reaction. So it turned out that one hand pushed his wife into the maelstrom, and the other sought to protect her from trouble, and it seemed that there had been no significant shocks lately, except for minor incidents in public places. Lisa, every now and then, got into curious situations. Not that she provoked them on purpose. They just sort of found her. I remember how she once helped an old man and picked up a purse from the floor of the bus, which he dropped. So instead of thanking Lisa, the old man scolded her for embezzling his change, even though the wallet was empty. Only documents were there. It was hard, but the old man was calmed down. Just before he left, he suddenly remembered that he had taken money for exactly 2 trips. At that moment, Lisa almost sobbed, but she pulled herself together in time. And all because the old man apologized. The incident was over, but it still left a residue. Since then, she's been cautious of any good intentions. Surprisingly, she was sympathetic to her mother-in-law's proposal. She didn't analyze and compare facts. In general, she took her word as a native person. despite the fact that she and William had been at odds until recently. On the other hand, she could not hold a grudge for long. She had a tremulous and tender heart, and the residue of any unpleasantness had dissolved. And Lisa was like a dandelion again. Anger and hatred didn't take root in her soul. They a priori did not find a source of realization to strike an unexpected blow. William, having recovered from the cake, ate his sandwiches, and as he drank his tea, his mother suddenly asked him, "Listen, son, why don't you and Lisa move in with me? Interesting movie, but we'd rather stay at home for now." "We'll live," he answered, and inwardly tensed at such a proposal. "Well, look, if you think so, I'd be glad to see you. We need time. Such questions are not solved in a hurry." Lisa supported her husband. "Sooner or later you'll formalize your relationship," Camille continued, "and I'd like to see you two together all the time. That way there will be harmony in the family, and it will be easier to help each other. We'll think about it, especially since we're used to the way of life we have between us," William replied, and thus drew a line under their conversation about a possible move. And I realized I wouldn't insist. Decisions like this take maturity. And as my sister-in-law rightly said, it's best not to get emotional. Yeah. They're not the best counselors in this case." "I agree," Lisa nodded. "Well, shall we pack up then? Thank you for your hospitality. Everything was delicious." "Aha, apart from the cake and sandwiches, I didn't offer you anything. The whole day just kind of flew by." "That's okay. We didn't come here to eat. We're here to solve your problems and make a difference." "That's true. But still, I apologize for the meager table," she said guiltily, lowering her head. "I liked it, just like home." Lisa put her arm around her shoulders and at the same second removed her hands. It felt like a hot surface. "Thanks for the compliment. And don't forget what I told you. Anything can happen in life. And this is stability." "All right. Thank you for your wise counsel." William and Lisa left the apartment, and Camille crouched down and cupped her head with her hands. What she was thinking at that moment, one could only guess, but the nervousness around the problems was very alarming, and primarily because they were the main indicators of impending collapse. Camille did not tell their son that the chair was wobbling beneath her, and it was still unknown how her future fate could have turned out. She did not dare to reveal the main cards in the hope that by that time her son would decide everything for her. But he didn't have all the information and power, and in the end, he almost found himself between a hammer and an anvil, and only the wife again found a way out of the situation. Lisa gave the last thing she had to save the family. But by then it was clear William's mother was in grave danger, and ironically, she had created it for herself. Even bravado, trying to minimize the loss. But that didn't help either. And after a while, the shocking truth came to the surface. The only person who had the vaguest inkling of it was Camille's own sister. Miranda watched her business endeavors from the sidelines, but stayed out of the way with unnecessary advice. She had enough of her own worries to take on other problems as well. At the same time, Miranda was genuinely worried about her sister and hoped that she hadn't fallen into a trap. After all, business, in addition to the investment of money and time, could take away the most important life, and such cases happened when businessmen lost. At first, they also started easily and effortlessly, and then everything flew into the abyss, and it was good if they managed to save themselves at the very last moment. Such people were called lucky, but there were also those to whom fate did not smile, and then only a marble or granite slab somewhere at the edge of the road reminded of them. Of course, Camille did not want such a fate for herself, but she could not help but realize what she had gotten herself into. All the more reason to use other people's money for her own well-being, and her sister had warned her about that. When it first started, that's what she used to say. "Look, Camille, it'll all go down the drain. You'll be looking for the fifth corner." "Nothing will happen to me," Camille said. "And I was born under a lucky star. In case of emergency, my son will help me and won't go anywhere." but I don't want to have to do it myself. This conversation took place just as Camille was having her final quarrel with William. He wouldn't take her advice, and he wouldn't leave Lisa. And to keep her out of the way and keep her mind off him, he moved with his wife across town. Camille had not visited them all this time, and they had no desire to ask for a visit. And today's meeting, frankly, had been confusing. William didn't expect his mother to ask for help, but I couldn't say no because then I'd hate myself. Inside, he still held out hope that his mother would change her attitude toward him and Lisa. But time flew by, and there were no signals from her. In fact, neither of them wanted to make the first step. And in this situation, pride was an obstacle. If one had been offended once, it wasn't certain that it wouldn't happen again. That's what was holding them back. Like a red rag for a bull during a bullfight, and at the same time it was impossible to concentrate on more important details. It was as if they had spoken in an unknown direction. Leaving behind a hazy trail, William tried to put all the puzzles of the Rebuses together, but eventually abandoned the endeavor. He lacked the stamina to find the missing link in the long chain of events. In addition, there was partially no logic with which to explain anything. When they arrived home, William and Lisa breathed a sigh of relief. It felt as if they had been interrogated. They barely got out of there, forgetting everything. They threw off their shoes and sat down on the sofa together and said in one voice, "What a day it's been today." I could hardly refrain from saying it to my mother's face. William shook his head. Lisa's eyebrows furrowed at the cafe. "No. About the natural relationship, I thought it was strange that she would take such a step. She said she'd never turn to us in her life, and she said a lot of other things. But we're not vindictive people, and we found the strength to forgive your mother. She's not a gift, but she's not a stranger to us. I haven't seen her eager to be related to us lately." William's hesitating. If you think that a couple of words spoken on the fly is a sign of kinship, you are mistaken. But what is it really? Did your mom try so hard? Are you looking for a black cat in a dark room again? Yeah, because I don't believe she's sincere. I helped her with her problems at the cafeteria. I'll let her work it out from here. So you didn't do everything angrily? Lisa asked and shook her head. I just started. And if you want to understand, you have to go into it thoroughly, and then everything will fall into place. So what's the matter? Your mother offered you the manager's job. I'll have to think about it. I'm sensing a catch. I just can't figure out what it is. There doesn't seem to be anything to worry about, except for the SES nagging, but I still feel uneasy. I was also kind of wary of her offer to work as a waitress in a cafe. But then I thought and came to the conclusion that if we make a concerted effort, then who knows? Suddenly, the establishment will really be ours to roll up our lips. Mother would never go for that, even though she promised a gold mine. William put her down. I think we should be very careful with her. But you heard her offer to sign the cafe over to you. Lisa stood her ground. That's right. And that's what worries me the most. Why hasn't she had that idea before? You don't think my mother wants to get rid of all her problems in one fell swoop? I don't think so. I mean, aside from those SES complaints you've practically dealt with, there's nothing there. Where would they come from? Besides, she would have told you about them. Yeah, Lisa, we've been living with you for almost a year, and I still haven't realized that my mom knows how to manipulate people. I didn't even realize it. I shrugged. That's what was going on today. And you left. William poked fun at her and accepted a waitressing position. So you didn't refuse to help her either. I told her not to go. What did you say? Yeah, you're right about that. We both let her talk us into it. And the interesting thing is, nobody forced us to go. If you're lucky enough to be born with the gift of persuasion, you use it all your life. Let's give it a shot. You'll combine your day job with running the cafe. I'll start working as a waitress. I can quit the market tomorrow. The owner won't be upset. Maybe she's right, and we're just screwing ourselves. William replied thoughtfully. It's just that, she hasn't contacted us for a long time. And now she's offered us such goodies. And most importantly, she didn't ask for anything in return. It was as if she decided to give up everything. Not to be dramatic, not to inflame the situation. Lisa put her arm around his shoulders and kissed him gently. Time will tell and put everything in its place. And that is, if we are right, it will be a life lesson for us. Yeah, I guess that's what we'll do. Don't go looking for a black cat where there's never been one. We gave ourselves a headache for nothing, and now we don't know how to get rid of it. I've got a good remedy, and you know what I mean. Lisa pulled him into the bedroom, and William's eyes lit up with anticipation of a passionate night. Such a remedy. Not only did the headache go away, but any other soreness stopped reminding of itself. Not only that, there was a burning desire to do good deeds. The body received such a powerful charge of vigor that it was enough for several days. And finally, the state of health improved, and in women also the emotional background. At the same time, the doubts that arose did not just cause them to have a heated discussion. Most likely, intuition worked, and there was dissonance in making further decisions. After all, William's mother once again. After all, William's mother really did not spoil with such gifts. She was only trying to make herself feel good. Naturally, under such circumstances, it is time to think about mercantile interests, and not only to earn trust, but also to benefit in this regard. Camille is quite good at it. At the dawn of creating a business and opening a cafe, she did not think about the difficulties she would have to face, and the first alarm bell in the form of a half-empty hall at rush hour forced her to take extreme measures. She started spending money unnecessarily, and that led to some accounting irregularities. With difficulty, but some things were resolved. But the biggest problem remained, and after a while, it got to her head. Yes, so that I left confused, however, got rid of all their barking, and with tears in my eyes thanked for the rescue. She was literally pulled out of the trap at the last moment. Just a little bit more, and there would have been a new granite slab by the road. And so she got off with a slight scare and finished her business epic. Didn't take what turned out to be a heavy load. It was not for nothing that her sister told her she'd be better off doing something quiet. The next day, William went to his main job, and Lisa called the owner of the trading tent and agreed with him on a 2-week vacation at her own expense. Whatever she said, her intuition told her the right thing to do, so she didn't hurry to quit her job. At the same time, and warned her husband that he did not particularly rush into the documents, did not take responsibility. If her mother offered to sign any papers, the premonition of trouble did not leave Lisa until the very last moment, up to the day when the unpleasant event happened, and immediately after it the flywheel of global changes spun, which almost pulled everyone who in one way or another had something to do with the cafe. Having arrived at the new place of work, Lisa first of all assessed the situation and realized that there were enough problems in the year that they had not been here. There had been dramatic changes. Some things had gotten better, others had fallen into disrepair. But the saddest thing was that people were passing by more and more often, not even looking inside, not even with one eye. All said that the mother-in-law lost her way and, without realizing it, pulled the business to the bottom. No wonder she needed her son's help. I didn't feel right wearing that hat. I thought I had the strength to cope with any problems, but it turned out to require courage and fortitude. And so she stalled out. Opening the glass door, Lisa entered the cafe, and when she saw her mother-in-law behind the bar, she said hello loudly. "Good afternoon, Camille." "Hello, sister-in-law. You haven't decided to take me up on my offer." "Yeah. What have I got to lose? It's not my last day. I live in." She shrugged her shoulders and announced the hall with a look. "What about the market? You won't regret it," with a squint. My mother-in-law asked. "No, it's all right. It's not a big loss. Besides, you promised career advancement. And that's the most important thing at my age. I like the way you think. And if you finally decided to work for me, I'd love to introduce you to the team. You have to start somewhere." Lisa nodded and followed her into the kitchen, where her mother-in-law had invited all the employees. Once in the main house of the cafe, as in any other place, she was saddened by the dull interior. Not to say she had the professional skills of a designer, but not gloomy. And even the incongruity at some points was just conspicuous. And that said that the hostess had no taste at all. But at the same time, her home was in perfect order. And in this regard, I wondered if she valued the reputation of the cafe at all. After all, everything starts in the kitchen. But Lisa decided not to say it out loud, so as not to incur the unjustified wrath of her mother-in-law. Today was to be her first day of work, after all. It was not enough for them to quarrel over nothing and then become blood enemies for the rest of their lives. Lisa couldn't afford that. All the more so because she had promised her husband to hold out for at least a week. For some reason, he decided to conduct an experiment and check other versions of the problems. Well, here are all my subordinates. You will work with them. The mother-in-law pointed to the crowd of young people. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa. I'm here to apply for a waitress position. If you'd like to join your team, I'd appreciate it. Join us. We'll all make money together. Answered one of the girls. My name is Christina, and I'm also a waitress. That's great. I already have a date. Will you be interning with her? Camille said, looking contentedly at Christina. And make sure the customers are always happy. Otherwise, you will not make money on them, and I on you and double the amount. That's right, Camille, the subordinate said with glee. Now get back to your workplace. There's nothing to crowd here. The employees began to come out of the kitchen one by one, extending their hands to Lisa and calling her name. She nodded in response, but she couldn't remember half of them. Christina looked at her with a smile and said cheerfully, "Don't even try. I could tell from your pensive look that you were mumbling their names to yourself. You shouldn't do that at work. You'll know everyone's face before you know it. It's hard at first, but then you'll get the hang of it. Thanks for the encouragement. I hope I learn quickly. I don't want to spend the whole internship on the bench," Lisa joked. And Christina took her humor to heart. It's not soccer, but you'll have to run too. And most importantly, without letting yourself get hurt. In a way, does anyone fight here? No, very rarely. However, there are customers who cling to beautiful waiters. They can pinch the soft spot and pull my arm. With me, such numbers do not pass, and I quickly put in place. And after that, the man comes to his senses for a long time. But this is categorically not to do. Shook her head Christina. We already have 2 girls because of such tricks left without a job. Camille believes that the customer is always right. Well, let her comfort herself. Or does she turn on her heel? I don't want any clients like that. And I'm not gonna let you get your hands dirty. Your business. And I told you, if you want my opinion, you won't last long with that kind of attitude. We'll look proudly in the mirror, Lisa. As they say, the eyes fear the hands. Confidence that she will succeed. Christina surprised me. After all, she came to the conclusion that it would not run away on the first day. But no, it didn't. And Lisa even managed to earn her first tip from a generous client. They, of course, were much less than the rest of the staff, but still pleasantly pleased. It was her first day and a small bonus. Praised her mother-in-law, appearing in the hall just before closing time. If you keep this up, you'll soon be earning more than your husband. Camille almost hesitated at the last word. Apparently, she wanted to say more than my son. But she realized it in time. She looked around and said the best possible thing. Lisa didn't correct her to avoid embarrassment. Otherwise, it would have been a disagreement. Thank you for your kind words, but it's better the other way around. She thanked her mother-in-law and left the cafe. It's up to you. But the career path is still on the table. Do you want a ride, or are you taking public transportation? The bus, Camille, the bus. It's more convenient for me. Okay, well, I'll see you tomorrow. She waved goodbye and added, William, say hi and thank you for your help. I will. After getting into the car, the mother-in-law turned around, put on the gas, and drove towards the center. Lisa waited for her bus at the bus stop and went home too. As soon as she crossed the threshold of the apartment, she was immediately picked up by her beloved husband. "And how was your first day on the job, okay?" "I'd give it a solid B." Lisa winked at him. "Okay. What did you take 1 point off for?" Frowned his eyebrows for molesting their customers. "2 of them even tried to touch me. I should have told my mother. She would have sent them away." "That's just it. She wouldn't have sent them away." Lisa answered evasively and shook her head. "Why not?" "Because, in her opinion, the customer is always right, no matter what he does. That is, he can appeal to the waitresses." "Angry?" asked William. "It turns out it is, especially since they're used to it." Lisa shrugged. "It's awful. You shouldn't have gone there in the first place. How's it going with you? Did you find out anything?" "Not yet, but when I was doing a remote report on my mom's computer, I noticed a folder with a password. It had an interesting name, X-Day. What does it mean?" "I'm not sure, but I'm guessing it holds something important. Best not to touch it. You'll end up getting blamed for it," she told him. "That's what I thought. But you should be careful too." William kissed her on the cheek and took her into the kitchen. It turned out that he had prepared a romantic dinner for them to coincide with her first day at work. Lisa blushed and kissed him heartily on the lips, neck, and chin. In general, everywhere her lips reached. And this was the beginning of a stormy continuation of the emotional outburst. At the same time, ahead of them awaited a series of incredible events, which led to the long-awaited denouement. After all, they so zealously wanted to find out what was hiding in this cafe, and what skeleton was hidden in the closet under a heavy burden. Involuntarily triggered the mechanism of disclosure, the couple were horrified when the harsh truth was revealed. And on the surface surfaced not only personal problems, Camille, but also much more severe consequences. That's where the wave that almost swept them into the abyss came from. And only by a miracle did they manage to save themselves, by taking advantage of an unexpected offer from Lisa. Yes, she was the one who sacrificed part of her past to stop the wave, and she was hailed as a hero for her courageous act. But that X-Day, as William read in the folder, was still 5 whole days away. He continued to help his mother periodically, building up the business and bringing in more clients. Lisa, on the other hand, was gaining experience as a waitress, and I must say that she was even better at serving customers in the cafe than she was at selling things at the market, especially since there she had to sell it profitably to get a percentage from the owner. And here it was enough that she brought the order on time and smiled languidly. Men themselves reached into their wallets to pay a generous tip. Others were not stingy at all and laid out on the table without looking at the denomination of banknotes. It came to the point that they managed to earn a month's salary in one day. But not always, and not everyone was so lucky. Usually in the evening or on weekends, and the waiters took advantage of it. They were carefully prepared to serve their customers to the highest standards. Lisa didn't try to squeeze the last of the money out of a customer. If he tipped, she thanked him profusely. If not, she simply said thank you. Come back anytime. And after a while this information reached her mother-in-law. She didn't think much of it at first. And when such tricks began to happen on a regular basis, she decided to teach her daughter-in-law a lesson. She sent an invitation to the kitchen through Christina. Camille stood outside the door, holding a large stainless pot in her hand. What she was going to do with it remained a mystery for now. But as soon as Lisa entered the kitchen, her mother-in-law abruptly opened the lid and poured over her daughter-in-law's head the leftover food from the table, and then set the pot on the table. She looked at her squeamishly and said these words, "Don't dishonor my graying head." "For what?" Camille, with tears in her eyes, shouted Lisa. At the same time, Christina stood behind her back and smiled evilly. "That's for not wanting to work like everyone else." My mother-in-law smelled of booze. It was a sign that she'd taken a drink before she was tortured. "If it's about the tips, you can collect them yourself. In fact, I don't want to stay here anymore." "Well, that's good. You're free to go." We don't need your services anymore. Is that right? Yes, Camille. The staff replied with a chorus of cheers and drooped their heads. They clearly didn't have the courage to tell the landlady the truth to her face. But Lisa didn't expect a gesture of goodwill from them. She looked at the crowd as contemptuously as her mother-in-law and shook her head dejectedly. She simply felt sorry for the young people who had become dependent on an exploitative employer. She could stay and continue to grovel before this homegrown business lady. Lisa said goodbye. "What did you say?" Her mother-in-law furrowed her brow and tried to pounce on her with her fists. "Just try it. You are no longer my head of the housing department. I will put you in your place." "Well, Otter, I shouldn't have gotten involved with you." Slamming the door, the mother-in-law left the kitchen and went to her office. Lisa turned to Christina and said angrily, "And you will regret that he poisoned Camille on me. I know it was you who made her follow me, but you realize she's miffed." "Christina, I don't want to hear anything, and you'd better get out of my sight." The calm and poised Lisa had lost her temper, and that was a sure sign that she was really pissed off. Normally, she'd keep her emotions in check in these situations, but she just couldn't. And better now than never. Sooner or later, she was gonna have to show her character. Except it never got through to the people it was meant for. With their heads down, they left the kitchen, and in the meantime Lisa cleaned herself up. She got rid of the remnants of her meal and rinsed her hair lightly under warm water, then hailed a cab and headed home to inform her husband of his mother's egregious antics. Upon seeing his wife's disheveled hair, William immediately realized there was trouble. "Calm down and tell me in order. What happened?" He put her on the sofa. He brought tea in a glass and made her make 2 goals. Period. It's just unthinkable. "Your mother humiliated me in front of everyone," cried Lisa. "All because of that damn tip. And what did she do? Just don't fall off the couch when you hear this." Lisa told him how she was first called into the kitchen and then had the leftovers poured over her head in front of everyone. And it was his own mother who had done the humiliating act. And she was under the influence of alcohol, and they mocked her squeamishly. The cafe staff stood and watched, unable to say anything to her. Now my mom had completely buried our relationship, and I honestly wanted it back. But I guess I'll just have to let it go. And most importantly, I'm sending her a gift. Make her happy. Maybe one last time before she loses her business. "What are you talking about?" With concern in your voice, Lisa asked, and even stopped crying. "They say that's how the attendance will drop. That's all." William shrugged and winked at her. "I see, but she'll have to make her own way. We agreed to help her, and in return we were humiliated again." In fact, William hadn't told his wife about the gift he'd sent her mother. The thing is, he managed to find the password to that encrypted folder and find out all the information it contained. To be honest, he even felt bad about what he read. However, William did not dare to sound the alarm because he realized his mother's cunning plan. She did not just want to register the cafe on him. She needed to get rid of a lot of problems, and first of all, somehow put the creditors on a false trail. She borrowed money from them for the promotion at a high interest rate, and all because the lenders turned out to be gangsters. They laundered money this way. But they did not even think of forgiving debts, regardless of the gender and age of the borrower. They didn't care who they beat the money out of, as long as they got their money back. Camille fell into a trap after William withdrew his support and also removed all his work from his computer. She began to have global problems. There were fewer and fewer visitors day by day. Profits were gradually declining. But X day, on the contrary, was approaching. And the less time there was left, the more anxious she became. Camille was worried sick, and when the bandits called and demanded to return the debt, she panicked and turned to her son again. But William wouldn't hear of it. "You're the one who ruined a good cause. We went out of our way to help you, and you took it upon yourself to humiliate my wife. Well, forgive me, you scoundrel. I'm ready to make amends." She wept in fear for her life. "Well, first I have to pay off my creditors. I realize you invited us here for a reason. You wanted to hang on to your debts to make our lives easier. I'm ashamed of what I've done, son. And this business, for crying out loud. And that low act in the kitchen. I could go on and on about my mistakes. But it's not gonna make me feel any better. I'm not making any promises. I'll talk to Lisa and call you back. In the meantime, can you sell your car? It's still not enough. But I'll wait, son. If you can think of something, I'll be grateful to you for the rest of my life. William discussed the impending disaster looming over his mother with his wife, and she again agreed to help. Despite both being angry at her mother-in-law for publicly humiliating her, figuring out their options, they had raised a third of the amount needed in a few days. Together with the car, it was exactly half. They had to find the rest of the money for the loan. So Lisa suggested selling Grandma's house. It was her only reminder of her past. But after weighing up the pros and cons, she came to the conclusion that human life was more precious. William, of course, crushed, but also did not sit idly by. He himself approached the creditors and persuaded them to wait another month. In the end, during this time they managed to sell Grandma's house. True, they had to lower the price to get cash at once. But there was nowhere to go. Camille's life was at stake. She caused problems, and they were solved by the whole neighborhood. Naturally, the cafe had to close because the money ran out. But the creditors were paid off and they got rid of her. What she experienced during this time could only be guessed. She didn't leave the house to go to the store and back. She was afraid that the bandits would chase her and send her to the other world. But it did not happen because William agreed with them. He assumed all obligations to repay the loan. His mother thanked them for a long time, especially Lisa for her miraculous rescue, and promised not to get into the business again. Moreover, she insisted that they move to live with her because they had to give all their savings to the creditors. On the other hand, this story became a lesson for them and a hint that one should be able to forgive. It is understandable that it is difficult to forget humiliation and meanness, but no one is immune to it. And when unforeseen circumstances arise, it's no time to be proud. And that's exactly what Lisa and William did. And they didn't regret it. They finally managed to find a common denominator and eliminate all the barriers. They had been in the way for a long time, but everything had its time. The moment of truth came when fate turned to them and helped them to find peace under one roof and in the circle of a large and friendly family.